Hey there, welcome to Between the Episodes. I hope you are all doing well. Today I want to argue that Breaking Bad is not just a great television show. It is the single greatest show ever made. Through its incredible character work, its cinematic visual storytelling, its obsessive attention to detail, and a story that somehow got better with every single season, Vince Gilligan created something that no other show before or since has been able to touch. And over the next few hours, I am going to prove it. But before we begin, I would just like to kindly ask you all to subscribe. It is totally free, and it really helps us push out more great content for this wonderful community we have managed to build. Anyway, that is enough. Let us get into it. Section 1. The premise that should have failed. There is a story that gets told a lot in Hollywood. Back in the mid-2000s, a writer named Vince Gilligan was having a phone call with a friend. They were both feeling stuck in their careers, and one of them joked that the only option left was to buy an RV and start cooking meth. Most people would have laughed that off and moved on with their lives. Vince Gilligan did not move on. He sat with that idea. He turned it over in his head, and eventually, he built it into what would become the greatest television show ever made. But here is the thing that nobody talks about enough. On paper, Breaking Bad had absolutely no business working. Think about the pitch for a second. A 50-year-old high school chemistry teacher gets diagnosed with lung cancer and decides to start cooking methamphetamine with a former student who dropped out of his class. That is the show. That is what someone had to walk into a room and sell to a network. And honestly, it sounds like one of the worst ideas for a television show that anyone could come up with. Gilligan himself knew this. He admitted openly that he did not give much thought to how well the concept would sell. He said the idea for the character grabbed him so deeply that he just ran with it, even though he knew it was, in his own words, such an odd and dark story that it could have serious trouble getting picked up by any studio. And he was right to worry. The show almost did not happen at all. When Gilligan first started shopping the idea around, most networks passed on it. The concept was too strange, too dark, too risky. This was a time when most successful dramas on television followed a pretty simple formula. You had your cop shows, your medical shows, your legal shows. The main character was usually someone the audience could root for without too much guilt. A detective solving crimes, a doctor saving lives, a lawyer fighting for justice. Nobody was lining up to watch a middle-aged science teacher turn into a drug lord. It just was not what people were buying. But then AMC took a chance. At the time, AMC was not the powerhouse it would later become. They were a network known mostly for showing old movies. They did not have any real reputation for original shows. They were hungry for something that would put them on the map. And Gilligan's strange little pitch about a meth-cooking teacher was different enough to catch their attention. So they said yes. Even after getting picked up, the show ran into problems right out of the gate. The first season was supposed to be longer, but the 2007 to 2008 Writers Guild strike cut it down to just 7 episodes. 7. Most shows get over 20 episodes in a first season. Breaking Bad got 7 to introduce Walter White, set up the entire premise, build the world, and convince people to come back for more. That is almost no time at all. And somehow, those 7 episodes were more than enough. The show premiered on January 20th, 2008. The very first scene opens with one of the most unusual images you will ever see on a television screen. A man in his underwear, wearing a gas mask, standing in the middle of a desert road, holding a gun while sirens get louder in the distance. No context, no explanation. Just this strange, almost funny image that immediately tells you this is not going to be like anything else you have ever watched. That opening was written and directed by Gilligan himself, and it did exactly what it needed to do. It grabbed you and made you ask one simple question. How on earth did this guy end up here? And then the show rewinds and takes you back to the beginning. You meet Walter White, and the very first thing you notice about him is how painfully ordinary he is. He is not exciting, he is not cool, he is not tough. He is a 50-year-old man who wakes up every morning, goes to a job where teenagers completely ignore everything he says, and then drives to his second job at a local car wash, where his boss forces him to go outside and scrub down cars in the parking lot. He comes home to a wife who seems more interested in selling household items online than spending time with him. His sex life is basically non-existent. And his brother-in-law, Hank, is this loud, confident DEA agent who commands every room he walks into, while Walt just sort of stands in the corner and fades into the background. This is really important to understand. The show does not start with an interesting man doing interesting things. It starts with possibly the most boring, beaten down, invisible man you can imagine. And that was the entire point. Gilligan wanted the audience to understand exactly who Walter White was before the cancer, before the meth, before Heisenberg. He wanted you to feel the boredom, the frustration, the quiet anger of a man who knows deep down that he is smarter than almost everyone around him, but has absolutely nothing to show for it. Because without that setup, without truly knowing how small and trapped this man feels, nothing that comes after would make any sense at all. And then comes the diagnosis: lung cancer, stage 3. And the show does something very smart here. It does not immediately turn Walt into a criminal. It lets you sit with the fear first. It lets you watch a man who just found out he is probably going to die and has no idea what to do about it. There is a moment early on where Walt stands in his backyard and strikes matches, one after another, watching the flame burn all the way down to his fingertips. He just stares at it, and even without any words being spoken, you can feel the shift happening inside him. Not toward crime, not yet. Just toward the simple and painful realization that his life, the way he has been living it, has been a complete waste. The decision to cook meth does not come out of nowhere. It comes from a very specific place that most people watching can understand, even if they would never do what Walt does. He has a family, a wife named Skyler, a teenage son named Walter Jr. who has cerebral palsy, and a baby on the way. His teacher's salary can barely cover the bills they already have. His health insurance is nowhere near enough to pay for the treatments he needs. And if he dies, which at this point seems very likely, his family is left with nothing. No savings, no safety net. Just bills and grief. So when Walt happens to run into his former student Jesse Pinkman during a DEA ride-along and sees a possible way to make real money for the first time in his life, the audience gets it. They might not agree with it. They might think it is a terrible idea. But they understand why he does it. A dying man with nothing left to lose, a genius-level understanding of chemistry, and a desperate need to make sure his family is taken care of after he is gone. The logic makes sense, even if the morality does not. And that tension, that gap between understanding someone and approving of what they do, is where Breaking Bad lives for its entire run. This is also where the show starts to reveal what makes it completely different from everything else that was on television at the time. Most shows back then ran on what you could call a reset button. Bad things would happen in an episode, but by the next week, everything would mostly go back to normal. The characters would be fine. The world of the show would be safe. You could miss a few episodes and jump right back in without being lost, because nothing really changed in any permanent way. Breaking Bad threw all of that out the window from day one. In this show, choices have consequences that stick. They do not go away. They do not get forgotten. They build on top of each other, episode after episode, season after season, until the weight of every single decision comes crashing down. And you can see that philosophy right there in the very first episode. When Walt and Jesse cook their first batch of meth in a beat-up RV out in the New Mexico desert, things go badly almost right away. Their drug dealer contacts show up. One of them recognizes Walt from the ride-along. And suddenly this chemistry teacher, who has never hurt a single person in his entire life, is facing a situation where he might have to kill someone or be killed himself. There is no easy way out. There is no rescue coming. It is just Walt, alone, with a choice to make. What happens next sets the tone for the entire series. Walt does not call the police. He does not run. He uses his brain. He uses chemistry. He creates a poisonous gas that takes out the threat. And just like that, in the span of a single episode, a high school teacher has committed his first act of violence. The show makes absolutely sure you understand that there is no going back from this moment. What is done is done. And everything that follows will be a direct result of this choice. The first season earned an 86% fresh score on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics praised Bryan Cranston's performance, the dark humor woven into the storytelling, and the way the plot just kept building momentum. But here is the detail that always gets left out of the conversation. Almost nobody watched it. The ratings for that first season were low. Really low. For a show that would eventually become one of the most talked about, most awarded, most praised programs in the entire history of the medium, Breaking Bad started its life with barely anyone paying attention. And that is what makes the whole thing so remarkable. This show did not have a massive marketing push behind it. It did not have a built-in audience from a best-selling book series or a popular movie. It did not have huge movie stars in the lead roles. Bryan Cranston was known mostly as the goofy, lovable dad from the sitcom Malcolm in the Middle. Aaron Paul was a relative unknown. The network was AMC, which was still trying to figure out what it wanted to be. Everything about Breaking Bad, from its dark concept to its unknown cast to its tiny network, suggested it should have been a small show that lasted a season or two and then quietly disappeared. But that is not what happened. What happened was the exact opposite. Every single season of Breaking Bad was better than the one before it. And that almost never happens in television. Most shows peak somewhere in the middle and then slowly fall apart as the writers run out of ideas, or the stories start repeating themselves, or the characters stop growing. Breaking Bad just kept climbing. Season after season, the writing got sharper, the characters got deeper, the stakes got higher, and the audience grew. By the time the show reached its final season, it was one of the most watched cable programs in America. The audience numbers literally doubled between the 4th and 5th seasons, in large part because Netflix made earlier seasons available for streaming right before Season 4 premiered, which let a whole new wave of viewers catch up and fall in love with the show. What started as one of the worst ideas for a TV show on paper became, against every odd stacked against it, the greatest show ever put on screen. 7 episodes in a shortened first season, a cast of unknowns, a network nobody took seriously, a premise so dark and strange that most studios would not touch it. And none of that mattered, because the execution was perfect. The writing was perfect. The performances were perfect. And everything started with Vince Gilligan refusing to let go of a weird idea he got from a phone call. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But a great premise only gets you so far. What truly made Breaking Bad untouchable was the man at the center of it all, and the single greatest character transformation in the history of television. The slow, terrifying journey of Walter White, from a man you feel sorry for, into a man you are absolutely afraid of. Section 2. Walter White, the greatest character arc in television history. When Vince Gilligan first described his vision for Breaking Bad, he used a phrase that has since become one of the most famous descriptions of any character in all of television. He said the goal was to take Walter White from Mr. Chips to Scarface. For anyone who does not know, Mr. Chips is a character from an old movie about a kind, gentle schoolteacher. Scarface is a movie about a violent, power-hungry drug lord. So what Gilligan was saying is that he wanted to take the nicest, most harmless man you could imagine, and slowly, believably, over the course of 5 seasons, turn him into a monster. And he did it. He pulled it off in a way that no show before or since has ever been able to match. But what makes Walter White's transformation so special is not just that it happens. Plenty of shows have characters who change over time. What makes it special is how it happens. It is so slow, so gradual, so carefully built that most viewers do not even realize the exact moment when Walt stops being the good guy. There is no single scene where he flips a switch and becomes evil. Instead, the show lays down one small choice after another, each one a tiny step further from who he used to be, until one day you look at this man and realize he is nothing like the person you met in the first episode. And the scariest part is that you followed him there willingly. You watched every step. You understood every reason. And for a long time, you were on his side. To understand why his arc works so well, you have to go back to who Walter White is at the very beginning. And the answer is almost painful in how ordinary it is. He is a man who wakes up every day feeling like life cheated him. He is overqualified for his job. He has a chemistry degree that should have made him wealthy, but instead he is teaching bored teenagers who could not care less about what he has to say. He works a second job at a car wash, where his own boss humiliates him by making him go outside and wash the cars of his own students. At home, his wife Skyler seems more focused on running the household than connecting with him. His brother-in-law Hank is everything Walt is not. Hank is loud, confident, funny, and works as a DEA agent, which means he gets to be the exciting one at every family dinner, while Walt just sits there, quiet, invisible, small. Gilligan and the writers made sure the audience felt all of this before anything else happened. They wanted you to see a man who was frustrated, overwhelmed, beaten down, stretched thin, passed over, and completely unfulfilled. Because the whole point of the show is that Walter White did not suddenly become a bad person when he got his cancer diagnosis. The cancer was just the thing that lit the fuse, the anger, the pride, the hunger for something more. All of that was already there, buried under years of quiet disappointment. When Walt gets his diagnosis and decides to cook meth, the show lets you believe, at least for a while, that he is doing it for the right reasons. He is a dying man who wants to leave money behind for his family. That is noble. That is selfless. That is a father doing whatever it takes to protect the people he loves. And for most of the first season, that story holds up. Walt is scared. He is out of his depth. He is a fish out of water, stumbling through a world of drug dealers and violence. When he has to kill someone for the first time, a drug dealer named Crazy 8, who he has been holding prisoner in Jesse's basement, the show makes you feel the weight of that decision in a way that is almost unbearable to watch. There is a scene where Walt sits down and makes a list on a piece of paper. On one side, he writes the reasons he should let the man go. On the other side, the reasons he should kill him. The list of reasons to let him go is long. He writes things about it being wrong, about this not being who he is. The list of reasons to kill him has only one entry. He will kill your entire family. And that one reason wins. Walt goes down to the basement, and he does it. But he cries while he does it. He is shaking. He is broken by it. And in that moment, you feel for this man completely. He did not want to do this. He had no choice. That is what you tell yourself anyway. That is what the show lets you believe. But then, something starts to shift. And this is where the writing gets brilliant, because the shift is so small at first that you almost do not notice it. Walt starts to get good at what he does. His meth, because of his chemistry background, is the purest product anyone in the drug world has ever seen. People want it. People are willing to pay a lot of money for it. And Walt, this man who has spent his entire adult life being ignored and looked down on, suddenly has something that makes people respect him. Something that makes people afraid of him. Something that gives him power. The moment where everything changes. The moment that Gilligan himself called the point where Walt truly breaks bad comes in the episode called Crazy Handful of Nothing. Walt has been going through chemotherapy and his hair has started falling out, so he shaves his head completely. He looks in the mirror and for the first time, he does not see Walter White, the teacher, staring back at him. He sees someone else. Someone harder, someone dangerous. He puts on a different jacket. He walks differently. He talks differently. And he goes to confront a violent drug dealer named Tuco, who beat up Jesse and stole their product without paying for it. When Tuco asks who he is, Walt does not give his real name. He says one word, Heisenberg. And then he throws a bag of crystals on the ground that explode and blow out the windows of the entire building. It is not a bomb. It is a chemistry trick, a piece of something called fulminated mercury. But the effect is the same. Everyone in the room is terrified. And Walt walks out with the money he came for, plus extra, as payment for what Tuco did to Jesse. Bryan Cranston, the actor who plays Walt, said later that his character took on the Heisenberg name and the new look so that he would not have to recognize himself in the mirror anymore. As long as he did not see Walter White, he could keep going. And keep going he does. Over the course of the next 4 seasons, the reasons Walt gives for staying in the drug business keep changing. And each new reason reveals a little more of who he really is underneath. At first, it is about the money for his family. Then it is about paying for his treatment. Then the cancer goes into remission and he has a chance to walk away. And he does not. He keeps cooking. He keeps building. He keeps climbing. Because it was never really about the money. It was never really about the family. It was about him. This is the key to understanding Walter White, and Gilligan spelled it out clearly. He said that Walt is a man who lies to his family, lies to his friends, lies to the world about who he truly is. But what makes him a standout liar? What makes him different from every other dishonest character on television is that first and foremost, he is lying to himself. He tells himself he is doing this for his wife and children. He tells himself he has no other choice. He tells himself that the people he hurts along the way deserve it, or that their pain is a necessary cost of keeping his family safe. But none of that is true, and the show slowly peels back those lies, one by one, until there is nothing left but the ugly truth underneath. There are moments throughout the series where Walt is given real chances to stop, clean, clear opportunities to walk away from the drug business and go back to his normal life. After his cancer goes into remission, he could quit. After he defeats his boss, Gus Fring, he could quit. There is no one forcing him to keep cooking, no one holding a gun to his head. But every time, he chooses to stay, because he likes it. Because after a lifetime of being invisible, he has finally found the one thing that makes him feel alive. The show even builds this idea into its very first episode, in a way that most people do not catch the first time around. In the pilot, Walt gives a chemistry lesson to his class. He stands in front of these bored teenagers and says that chemistry is the study of matter, but that he prefers to see it as the study of change. He talks about how electrons change their energy levels, how molecules change their bonds, how elements combine and change into compounds. He says that is all of life. It is the constant. Solution, dissolution, growth, then decay, then transformation. That speech is not just a chemistry lesson. It is a description of everything that is about to happen to Walter White over the next 5 seasons. The writers put the entire arc of the show right there in the first episode, hidden inside a classroom lecture that nobody in the room was paying attention to. As the seasons go on, the gap between who Walt says he is and who he actually is gets wider and wider. He manipulates Jesse over and over again, pulling him back into the business every time Jesse tries to get out. He lies to Skyler so many times and so convincingly that when she finally discovers the truth, their marriage is destroyed beyond any hope of repair. He watches Jesse's girlfriend Jane choke to death right in front of him and does nothing to save her because she was getting in the way of his plans. He poisons a child named Brock to manipulate Jesse into helping him kill Gus Fring. He orders the murder of 10 witnesses in prison, all within a 2-minute window, to protect his own secrets. And through all of it, he keeps telling himself the same story. I am doing this for my family. I am the good guy. Everyone else is the problem. What makes Cranston's performance so unbelievable is that even as Walt does these horrible things, the actor never lets you completely forget the man he used to be. There are still moments, even in the darkest parts of the show, where you can see a flash of the old Walter White. A moment of guilt, a look of sadness, a tiny crack in the Heisenberg mask that reminds you this was once a man who cried while killing someone in self-defense. That balance, that ability to show you both the monster and the man at the same time, is what earned Cranston 4 Emmy Awards for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series. No other actor had ever won that award 4 times for the same role. He did it because he took a character that could have easily been a cartoon villain and made him feel like a real human being, someone you could know, someone you could be related to, someone who could be you if the worst possible circumstances lined up in the worst possible way. There is a moment near the very end of the series, in the final episode, where Walt finally stops lying. He is standing in the kitchen with Skyler, and she starts to say it for him. She says she does not want to hear him say one more time that he did this for the family. And Walt stops. He pauses. And for the first time in 5 seasons, he tells the truth. He says he did it for himself. He liked it. He was good at it. And he was really alive. That single moment, those few quiet words, is the destination that the entire show had been traveling toward since the very first episode. The moment where Walter White finally admits what the audience figured out a long time ago. It was never about the family. It was always about him. Cranston won 4 Emmys. The show entered the Guinness World Records as the most critically acclaimed show of all time. And at the center of all of it was this one character, this quiet chemistry teacher who became the most terrifying man in Albuquerque, brought to life by an actor most people only knew as a sitcom dad. Gilligan wrote the greatest character arc in television history. Cranston performed it, and together they created something that no other show has been able to touch. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But Walter White did not make this journey alone. Every step of the way, there was someone walking right beside him. Someone who was never supposed to survive past the first season. Someone whose heart and pain became the emotional core of the entire show. And that is Jesse Pinkman. Section 3. Jesse Pinkman, the heart and conscience of the show. Here is a fact about Breaking Bad that changes the way you watch the entire show once you know it. Jesse Pinkman was supposed to die. Not at the end of the series, not in some big dramatic final moment. He was supposed to die at the end of the first season. That was the plan from the very beginning. Vince Gilligan created Jesse as a plot device. He was the low-level drug dealer who would help Walter White enter the criminal world. And then he would be killed off in a botched drug deal somewhere around episode 7 or 8. His death was supposed to haunt Walt and drive the guilt that would push the story forward in season 2. That was it. That was all Jesse Pinkman was ever supposed to be. But then the writers started watching Aaron Paul act. Paul had been a relatively unknown actor before Breaking Bad. He had done some small guest roles on other shows, but nothing that put him on anyone's radar. When he showed up on set as this loud, reckless, slang-talking drug dealer who called everyone bitch and wore baggy clothes and seemed like he did not have a serious thought in his head, something happened that nobody expected. He had chemistry with Bryan Cranston. Not just good chemistry, electric chemistry. The scenes between Walt and Jesse crackled with something that the writers immediately recognized they could not throw away. The way Paul played Jesse, there was something underneath all the attitude and the street talk. Something vulnerable, something human. Something that made you care about this kid even when he was making the worst decisions imaginable. So Gilligan made the call. Jesse would live. And that decision, more than almost any other creative choice in the history of the show, is what turned Breaking Bad from a great show into the greatest show. Because Jesse Pinkman did not just survive. He became the emotional heart of the entire series. He became the character that the audience connected with the most. And most importantly, he became the mirror image of Walter White. As Walt slowly fell into darkness over 5 seasons, Jesse, the dropout, the drug dealer, the kid everyone had written off, slowly climbed toward the light. That reversal, that flip, is one of the most powerful things Breaking Bad ever did. When we first meet Jesse, he is not someone you would look at and think, this guy is going to be the moral center of anything. He is a mess. He is cooking low-quality meth with his friend Emilio. He is using drugs. He has been kicked out of his parents' house because of his lifestyle. He lives in a run-down house that his aunt left him after she passed away, and the place is a disaster. He talks like a teenager, even though he is in his mid-20s. He calls himself Captain Cook, which is his street name for his meth operation. And he seems to think that is something to be proud of. On the surface, Jesse looks like exactly the kind of person who would end up dead or in prison within a few years, and nobody would be surprised. But Breaking Bad is a show about looking past the surface. And almost from the very beginning, the writers start dropping hints that there is a lot more to Jesse than what you see at first glance. The real turning point comes in a Season 2 episode called Peekaboo. Jesse has been sent to collect money from 2 meth addicts who robbed his friend Skinny Pete. He shows up at their house, ready to be tough, ready to play the role of the scary drug dealer. But when he gets inside, he finds something that stops him cold. The house is filthy. There is garbage everywhere, and sitting in the middle of all of it is a little boy. Maybe 4 or 5 years old, completely neglected. The kid is dirty. He is hungry. He has clearly been ignored by his parents for a long time. And Jesse, this supposed hardened criminal, this drug dealer who is there to threaten people and collect money, does something that tells you everything you need to know about who he really is. He takes care of the kid. He feeds him. He talks to him. He puts him in his bedroom and tells him to stay there so he does not have to see anything bad. And later, when one of the parents is killed in a violent accident right there in the house, Jesse picks the boy up, carries him outside with his hands over the child's eyes, sets him down gently on the front porch, and tells him to wait there. Then he calls the police to make sure someone comes for the boy. He does not run. He does not leave the kid behind. He makes sure that child is safe before he does anything else. That episode is the first real window into Jesse's soul. And what it shows you is a person with an enormous capacity for kindness and love that has absolutely nowhere to go. Jesse did not grow up in a home where that kindness was valued. His parents gave up on him. His teachers, including Walt, saw him as a waste of potential. The world told him over and over again that he was nothing, that he would never be anything. And so he started acting like nothing. But underneath all of that, underneath the drugs and the slang and the bad decisions, There is a person who cares deeply about other people, especially people who cannot protect themselves. This becomes one of the most important threads in the entire show. Jesse's connection to children shows up again and again. In Season 3, he learns that a young boy named Tomas, who is maybe 10 or 11 years old, is being used by drug dealers as a lookout and even as a killer. Jesse is horrified. He confronts the dealers directly, which almost gets him killed. And when Tomas is later found dead, shot by those same dealers to clean up loose ends, Jesse is so destroyed by it that he grabs a gun and goes after them himself. Walt has to intervene at the last second to save Jesse's life. That moment shows you something critical about both characters. Jesse is willing to die to avenge a child he barely knew. Walt is willing to kill to protect his business. Those two reactions tell you exactly where each man's heart is. And then there is Brock. Brock Cantillo is the young son of Andrea, a woman Jesse meets in a support group and falls in love with. Jesse becomes a kind of father figure to Brock. He takes him to the park. He plays video games with him. He cares about this kid in a way that is genuine and deep. So when Brock suddenly becomes seriously ill and Jesse suspects he has been poisoned, Jesse loses his mind. He is terrified. He is furious. And this is where Walt does something that might be the most evil thing he does in the entire series. Walt actually is the one who poisoned Brock. He did it to manipulate Jesse into helping him kill Gus Fring. He poisoned a child that Jesse loved. And then he looked Jesse in the eye and blamed it on someone else. And Jesse believed him, because despite everything, despite all the ways Walt had used him and lied to him and hurt him, Jesse still trusted his old teacher. That trust, and the way Walt abuses it over and over again, is one of the most heartbreaking things in the whole show. The relationship between Walt and Jesse is often described as a father and son dynamic. And that is accurate, but it is the darkest, most twisted version of that dynamic you can imagine. Jesse looks up to Walt. He calls him Mr. White, even years into their partnership, even after everything they have been through together. There is a part of Jesse that desperately wants Walt's approval, wants to hear him say that Jesse did a good job, that Jesse matters, that Jesse is worth something. And Walt knows this. He knows exactly how much power he has over Jesse, and he uses it constantly. When he needs Jesse to do something, he builds him up. He tells him he is special. He makes him feel value. And when Jesse tries to leave, or push back, or think for himself, Walt tears him down. He belittles him. He reminds him of every failure. He makes Jesse feel small and stupid and helpless. This pattern of manipulation is what makes Jesse's story so painful to watch. Because every time Jesse tries to get out, every time he tries to start over or do the right thing or build something good for himself, Walt pulls him back in. Or the consequences of Walt's actions catch up to Jesse in ways he never asked for. Jane, Jesse's girlfriend in Season 2, dies of a drug overdose in bed right next to it. What Jesse does not know, what he will not find out until much later, is that Walt was there that night. Walt stood over Jane as she was choking and made the decision to do nothing. He let her die because she was becoming a problem for his business. Jesse spent years blaming himself for Jane's death, carrying that guilt everywhere he went, never knowing that the man he trusted most in the world could have saved her and chose not to. Aaron Paul's performance across all 5 seasons is nothing short of extraordinary. Jesse cries more than any other character on the show, and every single time it lands, because Paul makes you feel every tear. When Jesse has to kill Gail Bedecker, a kind and innocent chemist, because Walt tells him it is the only way to save both their lives, the camera holds on Jesse's face as he pulls the trigger. He is shaking. He is sobbing. His eyes are wide with horror. And from that moment forward, Jesse is never the same. That kill breaks something inside him that never fully heals. Paul won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Drama Series 3 times for his work on Breaking Bad. 3 times. And every single one of those awards was earned in moments like this. Moments where Jesse's pain is so real and so raw that it does not feel like acting anymore. By the final season, Jesse has been through more suffering than almost any character in television history. He has lost Jane. He has lost his freedom. He has lost his sense of self. He has been beaten, manipulated, shot at, and emotionally destroyed over and over again. And then, in the final stretch of episodes, it gets even worse. Jesse is captured by a gang of white supremacists led by a man named Jack Welker. They chain him up. They force him to cook meth as their prisoner. He is kept in a concrete pit like an animal. When he tries to escape, they murder Andrea, the woman he loved, right in front of him as punishment. They keep Brock alive as a threat to make sure Jesse never tries to run again. It is the lowest point for any character in the entire series. Jesse has been reduced to a slave, cooking meth against his will, with everything and everyone he ever cared about taken from him. And this is where the grand reversal of the show reaches its peak. Walter White, the man who started as the sympathetic protagonist, is the one whose choices led directly to this nightmare. Jesse Pinkman, the man who started as the throwaway drug dealer who was supposed to die in season 1, is the one the audience desperately wants to see saved. When Walt returns in the final episode and guns down the white supremacist with a remote-controlled machine gun hidden in his car trunk, the last thing he does before he dies is free Jesse from his chains. Jesse and Walt look at each other one final time. Walt gives Jesse a small nod. Jesse does not say thank you. He does not forgive him. He gets in a car and drives away screaming, tears streaming down his face, laughing and crying at the same time, finally free after years of torture. Gilligan later said that Jesse ends up in Alaska, starting a new life, far away from everything that happened in Albuquerque. The fact that Jesse survived is a miracle of television writing. A character who was created to die became the soul of the show. Aaron Paul took a role that was meant to last a few episodes and turned it into one of the most beloved and heartbreaking characters in the history of the medium. Jesse Pinkman is the proof that Breaking Bad was not just a show about a man becoming evil. It was also a show about a man finding his goodness in the worst possible circumstances. And that is why, even after all the darkness and all the pain, the show leaves you with something that feels like hope. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But Jesse's journey does not exist in a vacuum. Every step of his suffering, every moment of his growth, happened because he was trapped between forces much bigger and much more dangerous than himself. And the most dangerous of all was not Walter White, but the man who came before him, the calm and smiling owner of a fried chicken restaurant, who turned out to be one of the most terrifying villains ever put on screen. Section 4. The Villains. How Breaking Bad Perfected the TV Antagonist. One of the things that separates a good show from a great show is the quality of its villains. You can have the best main character in the world, but if the people standing in their way are boring or one-dimensional or forgettable, the whole thing falls flat. The hero is only as interesting as the obstacle in front of them. And Breaking Bad understood this better than any show that has ever been on television. Over the course of its 5 seasons, the show introduced a series of villains that got more complex, more dangerous, and more fascinating with every single one. Each new threat was a step up from the last. Each one pushed Walter White further than the one before. And each one served as a dark mirror, showing the audience a version of who Walt was becoming, or who he secretly wanted to be. It starts early, in the very first season, with a man named Tuco Salamanca. Tuco is terrifying in the most straightforward way possible. He is loud, he is violent, He is completely unpredictable. He is a high-ranking drug distributor with a short temper and a habit of using his own product, which makes him dangerous in a way that is almost impossible to prepare for. You never know what Tuco is going to do from one second to the next. He can be laughing and friendly one moment, and then beating someone half to death the next. When Walt first meets Tuco to try to sell their meth, Tuco takes the product without paying and beats Jesse so badly that Jesse ends up in the hospital. This is the incident that forces Walt to become Heisenberg for the first time, to shave his head and walk into Tuco's headquarters with a bag of fulminated mercury and demand respect through an explosion. Tuco is the first real villain of Breaking Bad, and he serves an important purpose. He shows the audience what the drug world actually looks like. It is not glamorous. It is not cool. It is chaotic and brutal, and ruled by men who use fear and violence to get what they want. For Walt, who has spent his entire life in classrooms and car washes, Tuco is a wake-up call. This is the world you have chosen to enter. These are the people you are going to have to deal with. And if you cannot handle them, they will kill you. But here's where the story behind the scenes gets interesting and actually changes the entire direction of the show. The actor who played Tuco, Raymond Cruz, had a commitment to another television show called The Closer. He could not stay on Breaking Bad for as long as the writers originally planned. So the writers had to make a decision. They needed to write Tuco out of the show and come up with a new villain to fill the gap he left behind. And what they came up with was not just a replacement, it was an upgrade. It was one of the greatest villain introductions in the history of television. His name is Gustavo Fring, and he is nothing like Tuco. Where Tuco is loud, Gus is quiet. Where Tuco is reckless, Gus is careful. Where Tuco runs on emotion and impulse, Gus runs on patience and planning. The writers created Gus specifically to be the polar opposite of Tuco in every single way. And the result is a character so brilliantly constructed that critics have ranked him among the greatest television villains of all time. He was played by Giancarlo Esposito, and the performance he gave across seasons 2, 3, and 4 is one of the most chilling things you will ever watch on any screen. When Gus first appears on the show, you would never in a million years guess what he actually is. He is the owner of a fast food restaurant chain called Los Pollos Hermanos, which translates to the Chicken Brothers. He wears a bright yellow uniform shirt. He greets customers with a warm smile. He wipes down tables himself. He seems like the most harmless, most polite, most ordinary businessman in Albuquerque. He donates money to charity. He gives generously to local law enforcement. He is so well liked in the community that he has actually had dinner with Hank Schrader, the DEA agent who has spent years trying to track down the biggest drug operation in the region. Hank has sat across the table from the very man he is hunting and had absolutely no idea. That is what makes Gus Fring so terrifying. He hides in plain sight. He tells Walt at one point that, like him, Gus hides in plain sight. He drives a beat-up 10-year-old Volvo. He does not flash money. He does not draw attention to himself. He is the last person anyone would ever suspect of running one of the most successful drug operations in the entire southwestern United States. And beneath that polite smile and that clean yellow shirt is a man who is capable of things that would make Tuco Salamanca look like a schoolyard bully. The moment where the audience truly understands who Gus Fring is comes in the first episode of Season 4, an episode called Box Cutter. At the end of Season 3, Jesse killed Gail Bedecker, a chemist that Gus had been grooming to replace Walt and Jesse in the lab. Jesse did it because Walt told him it was the only way to keep both of them alive. If Gail could cook the meth on his own, then Gus would not need Walt or Jesse anymore, and he would have them both killed. So Jesse pulled the trigger and saved their lives, at least temporarily. In Box Cutter, the consequences of that decision arrive. Gus walks into the underground lab where Walt and Jesse are being held by his men. The two of them are terrified. They know that Gus wanted Gale alive, and now Gale is dead because of them. They do not know what Gus is going to do. Walt starts talking immediately, trying to reason with Gus, trying to explain, trying to bargain. He is rambling, sweating, stumbling over his words. Jesse stands frozen, and Gus says nothing. He does not respond to a single word Walt says. He walks slowly to a locker. He takes off his dress shirt and his tie. He puts on a protective suit. He picks up a box cutter from a nearby table, and then, still without saying a word, he turns to Victor, one of his own loyal employees, grabs him by the hair, and slashes his throat wide open right in front of Walt and Jesse. Victor bleeds out on the floor, while Walt and Jesse watch in horror. Gus calmly removes the protective suit. He washes his hands. He puts his shirt and tie back on. He adjusts his clothes so that every button is perfect, every fold is in place. And then, finally, he speaks. He looks at Walt and says just 4 words: "Get back to work." Then he walks out of the room. That scene is one of the most talked about moments in the entire series. And the reason it works so well is that it tells you everything about Gus without him having to explain anything. He did not kill Victor because Victor did something wrong. He killed Victor to send a message. The message was simple. I am in control. I decide who lives and who dies. And if you ever cross me again, this is what happens. Gus did not need to scream or threaten or throw things around the room. He did something much worse. He showed them, calmly and quietly, what he was capable of. And then he went back to his day as if nothing had happened. That level of calm in the face of extreme violence is far more frightening than anything Tuco ever did. But what makes Gus even more fascinating is his backstory and how it connects to his motivation. Years before the events of Breaking Bad, Gus had a partner named Maximino Arciniega. Max was more than just a business partner. The show strongly implies that Max was the person Gus loved more than anyone in the world. Together, they built Los Pollos Hermanos and developed a high-quality strain of methamphetamine. They traveled to Mexico to pitch a partnership with the head of the drug cartel, a man named Don Eladio. But Eladio felt disrespected by the way Gus and Max had been operating without his permission. So to teach Gus a lesson, Eladio ordered his enforcer, Hector Salamanca, to shoot Max in the head right in front of Gus. Gus broke down. He fell to the ground next to Max's body, weeping. And Eladio stood over him and told him that the only reason Gus was being allowed to live was because Eladio knew who Gus really was, which the show never fully explains. The mystery of Gus's past, of who he was in Chile before he came to Mexico, is something Gilligan deliberately left unanswered. He compared it to the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. You are not supposed to know what is inside. The mystery is the point. But what you do know is that from that moment on, from the second Max hit the ground, every single thing Gus did for the next 20 years was driven by one goal: revenge. Every restaurant he opened, every donation he made, every smile he gave to a DEA agent, every batch of meth he distributed, all of it was building toward the moment when he would look Don Eladio in the eye and make him pay for what he did to Max. And he does. In one of the show's most dramatic sequences, Gus travels to Mexico, sits down with Don Eladio and the entire cartel leadership at a beautiful poolside party, and offers them a gift: a bottle of expensive tequila. Everyone drinks. What they do not know is that Gus poisoned the entire bottle. He took a special capsule beforehand that delayed the poison in his system. And then he excused himself and forced himself to throw up, getting the tequila out of his body before it could take full effect. One by one, the cartel members collapse and die. Eladio himself falls face first into his own swimming pool and drowns. Gus stands there, weak and barely able to walk from the poison still in his system, and watches. 20 years of patience, 20 years of planning, and it all comes down to a bottle of tequila and a swimming pool. The reason Gus matters so much to the story of Breaking Bad is not just because he is a great villain, though he absolutely is. It is because of what he represents to Walter White. Gus is a mirror. He is a vision of what Walt wants to become. Before Gus, Walt's attempts at being a drug lord were clumsy and dangerous. He did not know how to distribute. He did not know how to avoid the law. He did not know how to run an operation. Gus knew all of those things. He ran a tight, efficient business. His employees followed his orders without question. The DEA did not even know he existed. He was everything Walt wished he could be. And that is exactly why their conflict becomes so intense. Walt does not just want to beat Gus. He wants to replace him. He wants to prove that he can do it better. But Gus and Walt also share the same fatal weakness, and the show makes this very clear. Pride. Gus's pride is what keeps him going back to Hector Salamanca, the old man in the wheelchair who killed Max, to taunt him. He cannot resist rubbing his victories in Hector's face. And that pride is exactly what Walt uses to kill him. Walt convinces Hector to strap a bomb to his wheelchair and lure Gus into the room by making Gus think Hector has gone to the DEA to rat on him. Gus, driven by his pride and his obsessive hatred of Hector, walks right into the trap. Hector rings the bell on his wheelchair, the bomb goes off, and Gus Fring steps out of the explosion with half of his face completely destroyed. He straightens his tie one last time, the same composed gesture he has made 1,000 times before. And then he falls to the ground and dies. It is one of the most iconic villain deaths in television history, and the connection to Walt's own story is impossible to miss. Gus was brought down by his pride, and in the seasons that follow, Walt will be brought down by his pride in almost exactly the same way. He should have learned from Gus's mistake. He should have seen it as a warning. Instead, he saw it as a victory. And that is what makes Walter White's downfall so perfectly tragic. He watched pride destroy the most dangerous man he had ever met. And then he made the exact same mistake himself. After Gus, the final season introduces Jack Welker and his gang of white supremacists as the last villains of the series, and they serve a very different purpose. They are not clever like Gus. They are not strategic. They are brutal, ugly, and cruel. And they exist to show what happens when the drug world is stripped of any pretense of intelligence or class. But the foundation that Gus laid, the standard he set for what a Breaking Bad villain could be, is what makes the whole show work. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But great characters and great villains are only part of the equation. What truly sets Breaking Bad apart from every other show is something that most viewers feel but cannot quite name: the writing. The way every single word in every single scene carries weight. The way a line of dialogue in the first season can pay it off 3 seasons later in a way that feels both shocking and completely inevitable. Section 5. The writing. Why every word matters. There is a question that comes up whenever people argue about what the greatest television show of all time is. What makes a show truly great? Is it the acting? Is it the story? Is it the way it looks? And the answer, at least when it comes to Breaking Bad, is that all of those things matter. But none of them work without the foundation underneath. And that foundation is the writing. Everything that makes Breaking Bad special, every character you love, every moment that made your jaw drop, every scene that made you hold your breath, all of it starts on the page. It starts in the writer's room. And the writer's room on Breaking Bad operated at a level that no other show in television history has been able to match. The team was relatively small. Vince Gilligan ran the room, and the core group of writers included people like Peter Gould, who would go on to create Better Call Saul, George Mastras, Moira Wally Beckett, Sam Catlin, Thomas Schnauz, and Jennifer Hutchison. Together, this group built one of the most carefully constructed stories ever told in any medium, not just television. And they did it by following a principle that sounds simple, but is incredibly difficult to actually pull off. The principle was this: every single second of screen time has to matter. George Mastras, one of the writers, explained it clearly. He said that screen time was precious, and that the goal was to fill every moment with emotion, not just to put the pieces of the puzzle together to tell the story, which is hard enough on its own, but to make sure that every 5 seconds of screen time carried some kind of feeling, even if it was very small and very subtle. And then he said something that I think explains a lot about why the show works as well as it does. He said you have to trust the audience to pick up on those small things, because audiences do. They notice. They feel it. Even when they cannot explain exactly what they are feeling, they know something is there. That trust in the audience is one of the most important things about Breaking Bad's writing. This is a show that never talks down to the people watching it. It never over-explains. It never has a character turn to the camera and tell you what you are supposed to think or feel. Instead, it gives you the information, sometimes in ways so small you might miss them on a first viewing, and lets you put the pieces together yourself. And when you do, when you catch something the writers planted 3 episodes ago or 3 seasons ago, it feels incredible. It feels like the show is rewarding you for paying attention. One of the best examples of this is the way Breaking Bad uses its cold opens, which are the scenes that play before the opening credits of each episode. In Season 2, the show does something that nobody had seen before on television. Several episodes throughout the season open with strange, unsettling scenes shot in black and white. You see a swimming pool. You see men in hazmat suits pulling debris out of the water. You see a pink teddy bear floating in the pool, burned and missing an eye. And you see a body bag being carried away. These scenes appear throughout the entire season, scattered across multiple episodes. And the show gives you absolutely no explanation for what you are seeing. You just have to sit with it. You have to wonder. You have to keep watching. And then, in the season finale, everything clicks into place. All of those black and white scenes were pieces of the same event, shown out of order across the whole season. What happened was a mid-air plane collision directly above Walt's house, caused by a chain of events that traces all the way back to Walt's actions. Jane's father, Donald Margolis, was an air traffic controller. After Jane died, after Walt stood by and watched her choke in her sleep, Donald was so destroyed by grief that he went back to work too soon and made a critical error that caused 2 planes to collide in the sky above Albuquerque. The debris, the teddy bear, the body bags, all of it fell into Walt's backyard swimming pool. The writing team seeded the answer to that mystery across an entire season. They trusted the audience to hold on to those images, to carry that unease week after week, and to feel the full weight of the payoff when it finally arrived. And the payoff was not just a shocking event. It was a statement about the show's entire philosophy. Walt's choices do not just hurt the people directly around him. They ripple outward. They touch people he has never met. A man he never knew lost his daughter because of something Walt did. And that grief caused the death of hundreds of innocent people in a plane crash. The pink teddy bear's missing eye becomes one of the most important recurring images in the show, a symbol of the destruction that follows Walt wherever he goes. Another example of the writing's long-term planning is the book. In the show, Walt has a copy of a poetry collection called Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. It is a real book by one of the most famous poets in American history, and its presence in the show is not random. The book is given to Walt by Gail Boddicker, the gentle, kind chemist who works in Gus Fring's lab before Jesse kills him on Walt's orders. Gale admires Walt's brilliance and inscribes a dedication in the front of the book. Walt keeps it. He puts it in his bathroom. The book sits there for a long time. You might even forget about it if you are not paying close attention. And then, much later, in the final stretch of the series, Hank is at Walt's house for a family gathering. He goes to use the bathroom, and while sitting there, he picks up the book off the back of the toilet. He opens it. He sees the inscription from Gale, and in that moment, everything Hank has been wondering about, every suspicion he has been trying to confirm, clicks into place. He realizes that his brother-in-law, the mild-mannered chemistry teacher, is Heisenberg. The drug lord he has been hunting for years has been sitting across from him at family dinners the entire time. That moment works so well because the show set it up patiently, quietly, over multiple seasons. The book was introduced early. Gale was introduced early. The inscription was shown to the audience. All of the pieces were there, just waiting for the right moment to come together. And when they do, it does not feel forced or cheap. It feels earned. It feels like the most natural thing in the world, because the writers did not rush it. They trusted the story, and they trusted the audience. The writers also imposed strict rules on themselves that kept the quality high. One detail that fans and critics have talked about is the fact that the show was only allowed to use one censored F-bomb per season. One. Across an entire season of a show about drug dealing and murder and violence, they could only use that word once per year. This might seem like a small thing, but it forced the writers to think very carefully about every word of dialogue. It made them precise. It made them deliberate. And it meant that when the word did show up, it carried real weight. The most famous use of it is in a Season 3 episode that is literally titled IFT, and the audience does not find out what those letters stand for until the very end of the episode, when Skyler reveals them in one devastating sentence. The show's writing is also famous for something it almost never gets credit for, which is its humor. People tend to remember Breaking Bad as this dark, intense, serious show. And it absolutely is all of those things. But it is also genuinely funny. Not in a way that breaks the tension or makes light of the serious moments, but in a way that feels natural to the characters and the world they live in. Saul Goodman, the criminal lawyer played by Bob Odenkirk, is responsible for a huge amount of the comedy. His one-liners, his sleazy charm, his ridiculous television commercials. All of it provides moments of laughter in a show that might otherwise be too heavy to sit through for hours at a time. And the humor is not just relief. It serves the story. It makes the dark moments feel even darker by contrast. When you are laughing one minute and watching someone die the next, the emotional whiplash is part of what makes the show so powerful. The writing also extends to what some would call the worst episode of the series. And even here, Breaking Bad proves it is on a different level from everything else. The episode is called Fly. It is from Season 3, and it was written because the production had gone over budget and needed to create a very cheap episode using only 2 actors and 1 set. The entire episode takes place inside Gus Fring's underground lab. Walt becomes obsessed with a fly that has gotten inside the lab, and he spends the whole episode trying to kill it. Jesse tries to help. That is the entire plot. A man trying to kill a fly. On the surface, it sounds like filler. It sounds like exactly the kind of episode that a show makes when it runs out of money and has to stall for time. But in the hands of Breaking Bad's writers, specifically the script by Sam Catlin and Moira Walley-Beckett, and directed by Ryan Johnson, the episode becomes something completely different. It becomes a quiet, intense exploration of Walt's guilt and paranoia. The fly is not just a fly. It is contamination. It is the thing that does not belong. And the longer Walt chases it, the more you realize that the contamination he is really worried about is not in the lab. It is inside him. He is the thing that does not belong. He is the impurity. There is a moment in the episode where Walt, exhausted and half asleep, nearly confesses to Jesse about watching Jane die. He comes so close to telling the truth, and then pulls back at the last second. It is heartbreaking and terrifying at the same time. And it all happens in an episode about a man trying to swat a bug. That is the level of writing we are talking about. Even when Breaking Bad was forced to make a cheap bottle episode, even when the constraints should have produced something forgettable, the writers found a way to make it meaningful. The show has 62 episodes in total, and there is a legitimate argument to be made that not a single one of them is bad. Not one. Critics and fans have gone back and forth about which episodes are the weakest, and the ones they point to are still better than the best episodes of most other shows. That kind of consistency across 5 seasons and 62 episodes is almost unheard of in television. The writing of Breaking Bad is also special because of what it does not do. It does not cheat. It does not introduce problems and then solve them with information the audience did not have. When Walt gets out of an impossible situation, and he gets out of many impossible situations throughout the series, the solution always comes from something that was already established in the story. His chemistry knowledge, a relationship that was built over previous episodes, a detail that was introduced casually and then becomes critical later. The show plays fair with its audience at every turn, and that fairness, that respect for the viewer's intelligence, is what makes every twist and every surprise feel satisfying instead of cheap. There is a famous quote from the show's writer's room, where Gilligan described their process as writing themselves into a corner and then trying to figure out how to get out. They would put Walt in the most impossible situation they could think of, and then they would spend days, sometimes weeks, figuring out a solution that was both surprising and logical. The joy of watching Breaking Bad is that every escape, every victory, and every defeat feels like it was the only thing that could have happened. It feels inevitable. And that feeling of inevitability, that sense that you are watching a story unfold exactly as it was always meant to, is a direct result of writing that never takes the easy way out. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But words on a page are only half the story. What makes Breaking Bad truly stand apart from everything else on television is what happens after the script is written. The way it looks, the way it is shot, the way the camera itself becomes a storyteller, turning every frame into something that belongs in a movie theater, not on a television screen. Section 6. Cinematography. Television that looks like cinema. There is a moment very early in Breaking Bad, right there in the first episode, that tells you this show is going to look different from anything else on television. Walter White is standing in front of his chemistry class, talking to a room full of teenagers who could not care less about what he is saying. And the camera is positioned below him, shooting upward, making this small, ordinary man look like a giant. It is a strange choice for that moment, because Walt is not powerful. He is not intimidating. He is a teacher being ignored by his own students. So why is the camera making him look so big? Because the show is being sarcastic. It is using the camera to mock Walt's situation, to highlight the gap between how important he thinks he should be and how invisible he actually is. And that kind of visual storytelling, where the camera is not just showing you what is happening, but telling you how to feel about it, is what makes Breaking Bad look like nothing else that has ever been on television. Before Breaking Bad came along, most television shows looked more or less the same. The camera setups were simple and functional. You had your wide shots to show the room, your medium shots for conversations, and your close-ups for emotional moments. It worked. It told the story. But it was not art. It was not trying to be beautiful or meaningful or layered with hidden messages. Television was television, and movies were movies. And nobody expected a TV show to look like something you would see in a theater. Breaking Bad changed that completely. From the very first episode, The show announced that it was going to treat every single frame with the same care and attention that you would expect from a major Hollywood film. And that commitment to visual quality never dropped. Not for one episode across the entire 5-season run. The first season was shot on 35mm film by a man named John Toll. If you do not recognize that name, you might recognize his work. He was the person behind the camera on Braveheart and The Thin Red Line, two movies that are famous for how incredible they look. Having someone of that level working on a small cable show in its first season was unusual, to say the least. But Toll helped establish the visual foundation that the entire series would be built on. He created a look that mixed natural light with deep shadows, warm desert colors with cold clinical interiors, and a feeling that was both grounded in reality and slightly heightened at the same time. The show did not look like real life, but it did not look fake either. It existed in its own visual space, somewhere between a documentary and a dream. When the second season came around, a new person took over behind the camera. His name was Michael Slovis, and he would go on to shoot the show for the rest of its run. Slovis later said that Breaking Bad was the high point of his entire career, calling it the pinnacle of creativity in over 34 years of working in the film industry. That is not a small statement. This is a man who had been making things look good on screen for more than 3 decades, and he said that nothing he had ever worked on compared to Breaking Bad. When the show ended, he said he did not know what to shoot after it, because nothing could measure up. It was that good of an experience. What Slovis brought to the show was a willingness to try things that nobody had ever tried on television before. He introduced extreme close-ups that put you right inside the action. He used wide-angle lenses that stretched the image and made the desert feel even more vast and empty. He played with focus in ways that drew your eye exactly where the story needed it to go. But most importantly, he and the directors developed 4 specific types of camera shots that became the visual signature of Breaking Bad. The things that made the show instantly recognizable, even if you only saw a single frame. The first was the wide aerial shot. Breaking Bad is full of moments where the camera pulls way up above the action and shows you the characters from very far away, surrounded by the endless flat desert of New Mexico. These shots do something powerful to the viewer. They make you feel like you are watching from a distance, like a god looking down on tiny creatures running around below. The characters look small and insignificant against the landscape, and that smallness is the whole point. No matter how big Walt's ego gets, no matter how powerful Heisenberg thinks he is, from up there, he is just a tiny dot in the middle of nowhere. The desert does not care about his plans, or his empire, or his pride. The second signature shot was the time-lapse. The show uses sped-up footage of clouds moving across the sky, shadows sliding across buildings, the sun rising and setting over Albuquerque. These shots appear between scenes, almost like the show is taking a breath, and they serve a similar purpose to the aerial shots. They give you a sense of time passing, of the world continuing to turn, regardless of what is happening in Walt's life. They remind you that the universe is indifferent to human drama. The sun sets the same way, whether Walt is cooking meth, or sitting in a hospital, or burying money in the desert. The third, and possibly most famous signature of Breaking Bad's visual style, is the object point of view shot. In most shows and movies, when you see something from a character's point of view, you are seeing what a person sees through their own eyes. Breaking Bad flipped that idea completely. Instead of showing you the world through a person's eyes, the show constantly puts the camera inside objects and shoots outward. You see Walt and Jesse from inside a trash can looking up. You see them from inside a washing machine. You see a scene play out from inside a microwave, or from the bottom of a hole being dug in the ground, or from the trunk of a car. In one famous shot, the camera is strapped to the bottom of a shovel, and you watch the characters from the shovel's perspective as they dig. These shots are weird and unusual, and they should not work as well as they do. But the reason they work is because they make you feel something very specific. When you are watching from the perspective of an object that cannot move or think or do anything, you have no control over what is happening. You are just observing. You cannot stop it. You cannot change it. You are a passive witness to events that are already set in motion. And that feeling of helplessness mirrors one of the show's biggest themes, which is that once certain choices are made, the consequences are going to play out whether anyone wants them to or not. You can only watch. The fourth technique was what has been described as wide and closed framing. The show would often start a scene with a very wide shot showing you the whole environment, and then slowly, over the course of the scene, the framing would get tighter and tighter, closing in on the characters until they felt trapped inside the frame, with no way out. This mirrors what is happening to them emotionally. As the walls close in on Walt, as his options get fewer and his lies get harder to maintain, the camera reflects that by giving him less and less room to breathe. Together, these four techniques gave Breaking Bad a visual language that was completely its own. No other show looked like this. No other show had even tried to look like this. And what made it even more impressive was that the visual choices were never just showing off. Every unusual angle, every strange camera placement, every wide desert shot was serving the story. The visuals and the writing were working together, hand in hand, each one making the other stronger. The show also drew heavy inspiration from a style of filmmaking called the spaghetti western. These were a type of cowboy movie made mostly in the 1960s by directors like Sergio Leone, famous for their long, tense standoffs, their wide desert landscapes, and their focus on morally questionable characters doing bad things in beautiful places. Breaking Bad took that style and brought it to modern-day New Mexico. The desert is not just a backdrop in this show. It is a character. It is this vast, empty, unforgiving space where people go to do things they cannot do in the city. People cook meth in the desert. People bury bodies in the desert. People dig up barrels of money in the desert. And the camera treats every one of those moments with the same grand, sweeping beauty that Leone gave to his gunfight scene. There is something deeply unsettling about watching horrible things happen in a place that looks so gorgeous. And the show uses that contrast constantly. The lighting in Breaking Bad deserves its own discussion because of how much storytelling is packed into it. The show uses the harsh New Mexico sunlight to create stark differences between light and shadow on characters' faces. Early in the series, when Walt and Jesse first meet in the pilot, their faces are half in light and half in shadow. That single image tells you something about both of them before a word is spoken. They each have a light side and a dark side. They are two sides of the same coin. As the show goes on, as Walt sinks deeper into his criminal life, the lighting around him gets darker and more extreme. The shadows on his face get heavier. The rooms he occupies get dimmer. The show is literally darkening around him as his soul darkens. This applies to other characters too. Each major character on the show was given what you could call a visual identity, a consistent way of being filmed that reflected who they were. Walt's scenes grew darker and more shadowed over time. Jesse's scenes leaned into chaos and instability, with shaky camera work and uncomfortable angles that reflected his constant internal struggle. And Gus Fring was filmed with precise, clean, stable compositions that reflected his controlled and calculated nature, right up until his death scene when that control was literally blown apart. The setting of the show also played a massive role in its visual identity. Breaking Bad was originally supposed to take place in Riverside, California. If that had happened, the show would have looked completely different. It would have been another show set in the same kind of urban landscape that audiences had seen 100 times before. But when production moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, something clicked. The desert gave the show a look that was unlike anything else on television. The wide open spaces, the brown and orange earth, the massive sky stretching out in every direction. It all made Albuquerque feel like the setting of a modern Western, a frontier town where the rules of civilization get thinner the further you drive from the city. Slovis and the directors used that landscape like a painter uses a canvas. The colors of the desert, the way the light changes from morning to evening, the way a single figure walking across an empty plain can look both heroic and completely alone. All of it fed directly into the story the show was telling. Albuquerque was not just where Breaking Bad happened. Albuquerque was part of why it worked. Michael Slovis once said in an interview that after Breaking Bad ended, he did not know what to shoot next because nothing could compare. He described the show as the greatest creative experience of his life. And when you watch the show, especially on a rewatch when you know the story and can pay more attention to how it is being told visually, you understand exactly what he means.
Every frame's intentional. Every shot is purposeful. Every camera angle is telling you something, even if you do not realize it until the second or third time through.
Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But the camera tells only half the story. The other half is told through something even more subtle, something woven so deeply into every scene that most viewers feel it without ever being able to name it. The hidden language of color that runs through every single episode of the show, turning every wardrobe choice, every piece of furniture, and every background detail into a piece of the puzzle. Section 7. Color Theory. The hidden language of Breaking Bad. Most television shows pick the colors of their characters' clothes based on what looks good on camera. Maybe a costume designer thinks a blue shirt works well with an actor's eyes, or a red dress looks striking in a particular scene. It is a practical decision, not a storytelling one. Breaking Bad did something completely different. In this show, every single color you see on screen means something. Every shirt, every jacket, every piece of furniture, every background detail was chosen on purpose, mapped out carefully at the beginning of each season, and used to tell you things about the characters that the dialogue never says out loud. This is not fan theory or overreading. Vince Gilligan confirmed it directly. In an interview with Vogue magazine, he explained that at the start of every season, he would sit down with the costume designer and the production designer and have a detailed conversation about the specific colors they would use for each character. Throughout the course of that season, every color choice was deliberate. Nothing was random. Nothing was an accident. And once you know that, once you start paying attention to what characters are wearing and what colors surround them, the show opens up in a way that is almost overwhelming. There are entire layers of meaning hiding in plain sight that most viewers never notice on their first time through. It starts with the names: Walter White and Jesse Pinkman, White and Pink. Even the characters' last names are colors. Gilligan explained that white was chosen for Walter because it represented something vanilla and bland. It was the color of a man with no flavor, no excitement, no presence. He was plain. He was boring. He was the human version of beige wallpaper. And pink was chosen for Jesse because it is a youthful color, and it was used to emphasize just how young Jesse was compared to the world he was getting pulled into. He was a kid, basically, being dragged into something way too big and way too dangerous for someone his age. Walter White's wardrobe is where the color storytelling is most obvious, because it tracks his transformation across the entire series. When we first meet Walt in the pilot, he is wearing soft, muted colors. Khakis, beige jackets, pale green shirts. These are the colors of a man who has blended into the background of his own life. They are boring. They are forgettable. They are the kind of clothes that nobody would ever notice or remember, which is exactly the point. Walt is invisible, and his clothes tell you that before a single word of dialogue does. But as Walt starts cooking meth, and the Heisenberg side of his personality begins to emerge, the colors he wears start to change. He moves toward green, which in the world of Breaking Bad represents greed, desperation, and envy. In the very first episode, Walt wears a green apron when he makes his first batch of meth. That is not a coincidence. Green is the color of money and the color of wanting. It is the color of a man who is desperate to change his situation and is willing to do anything to make it happen. As the show goes on and Walt's greed grows, the green gets bolder and more noticeable. And then comes the black. When Walt fully transforms into Heisenberg, his wardrobe shifts to dark colors. The iconic black pork pie hat, the dark sunglasses, the black jacket. Black in Breaking Bad represents power, death, evil, and deception. Every time Walt puts on that hat, he is not just changing his appearance, he is putting on a costume. He is becoming someone else. And the show uses that color to signal to the audience that the man standing in front of you is no longer Walter White, the chemistry teacher. He is Heisenberg, the drug lord. The transition from beige to green to black is Walt's entire character arc, told through the clothes on his back. Skyler White is connected to the color blue throughout the entire show. Blue in Breaking Bad represents loyalty, purity, and sadness. Skyler wears blue constantly, especially in the early seasons when she is still the loyal wife trying to hold her family together. The color reflects her desire for a normal, stable life and her dedication to her husband, even when things start to get strange. But as Skyler discovers the truth about Walt, as she gets pulled deeper into his criminal world through money laundering and cover-ups, her shades of blue get darker. The bright, clean blues of the early seasons give way to deeper, heavier tones that reflect the sadness and the weight of what she is carrying. Skyler's blue is also connected to Walt's signature product, the blue meth. The purest thing Walt ever created carries the same color as the wife whose life he destroyed. Marie Schrader, Skyler's sister, is the most obvious example of the show's color coding, and she is the one that usually makes first-time viewers start paying attention to the pattern. Marie wears purple in almost every single scene she appears in. Her house is decorated in purple. Her kitchen appliances are purple. It is everywhere, and it is impossible to miss once you notice it. Purple in the world of the show represents pride, control, and obsession. Marie is a woman who needs to feel in control of her surroundings. She is opinionated, she is particular, and she has a compulsive shoplifting habit that suggests something deeper going on beneath the surface. Her obsessive attachment to purple is like a security blanket. It is her way of imposing order on a world that keeps threatening to spin out of control. And here is a detail that makes the color work even more impressive. When Hank dies, when the worst possible thing happens and Marie loses the person she loves most, she stops wearing purple. She appears in black, the color of mourning and death. After an entire series of watching Marie draped in purple in every single scene, seeing her without it is jarring. It hits you in the gut. You feel the loss not just because of what happened in the story, but because the visual language of the show has suddenly and violently changed. Something is missing. Something is wrong. And you can see it before anyone says a word. Jesse Pinkman is most closely tied to the color yellow, which in Breaking Bad is the color of the meth business itself. Yellow represents caution, danger, and involvement with the drug trade. Jesse wears yellow frequently throughout the series. The hazmat suits that Walt and Jesse wear while cooking are bright yellow. And Gus Fring's Los Pollos Hermanos uniform is built around yellow, reflecting the fact that his entire restaurant empire is a front for his drug operation. Yellow is the color of the thing that connects all of these characters together. It is the color of the product that gives them money and power, and ultimately destroys their lives. The show even hides color clues inside details that most people would never think to look at. There is a van that Walt uses at one point to transport large amounts of cash. The license plate on that van includes the characters D4D, D31. That looks like a random combination of letters and numbers, but it is actually a code. D4D, D31 is the exact code used in web design to produce a specific shade of yellow. The writers literally hid a color reference inside a license plate. That is the level of detail we are talking about. Nothing in Breaking Bad is there by accident. The show also uses color as a way to separate different locations and storylines. Whenever the story moves to Mexico, a yellow filter is placed over the entire image. Everything looks warmer, more golden, slightly different from the normal look of the show. This is not just a visual choice to make Mexico look different from Albuquerque. It is a storytelling choice. The yellow filter connects those scenes to the drug world, to danger, to the cartel. The audience feels the shift immediately, even if they cannot explain why. The normal scenes in Albuquerque have no filter at all, which creates a subtle but constant contrast between Walt's two lives. His normal life looks normal. His criminal life is bathed in yellow. One of the most heartbreaking uses of color in the entire series involves the color pink and a stuffed teddy bear. Pink in Breaking Bad is used sparingly, and when it appears, it almost always connects to innocence. Walt's baby daughter Holly often wears pink. It is the color of a child who has done nothing wrong and has no idea what kind of world she has been born into. The pink teddy bear that appears throughout Season 2, the one floating in Walt's pool with a missing eye, is a symbol of that lost innocence. It is a piece of the plane crash that Walt's actions caused, a burned and broken reminder that his choices have consequences that reach far beyond his own life. There is even meaning hidden in the names beyond Walt and Jesse. Walt's former business partner is named Elliot Schwartz. Schwartz comes from the German word Schwarz, which means black. So you have white and black, light and dark, good and evil. Except the show being the show, nothing is that simple. Walt, the man named White, becomes the villain. Elliot, the man whose name means black, is a successful, law-abiding businessman who never did anything wrong. The names set up an expectation, and then the show flips it completely, just like it does with everything else. In the very last episode, the colors come full circle. Walt returns to Albuquerque wearing a beige jacket, the same kind of plain, forgettable color he wore in the very first episode. It is as if, at the very end, the Heisenberg persona has been stripped away, and all that is left is the ordinary man underneath. And in his final scene, lying on the floor of the meth lab where he dies, the lighting is cool and clinical. There is no warmth. There is no color. Just Walt, alone, surrounded by the equipment that defined and destroyed his life. 5 seasons, 62 episodes, and every single color in every single frame was chosen on purpose. That is not just good television. That is an obsession with craft that borders on insane. And it is just one more reason why nothing else has ever come close to what Breaking Bad achieved. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But color and camera work are tools, and tools are only as good as the people who use them. The reason Breaking Bad visual storytelling works so well is because it is built on top of something even more important: the characters who fill every frame. And while Walter White, Jesse Pinkman, and Gus Fring get most of the attention, the show is packed with supporting characters so richly written and so brilliantly performed that they could carry entire shows of their own. And in some cases, they actually did. Section 8. The supporting cast. Nobody is wasted. There is a test that I think separates truly great shows from good ones. Take any supporting character, any character who is not the main focus of the story, and ask yourself this question: could this person carry their own show? Could you build an entire series around them and have it be worth watching? For most television shows, the answer is no. The supporting characters are there to serve the main character's story, and nothing more. They show up when they are needed. They say their lines, and they fade into the background when the scene is over. They are functional, but they are not alive. Breaking Bad passes that test in a way that almost no other show ever has. The supporting cast of this series is so richly developed, so carefully written, and so brilliantly performed that several of these characters did not just feel like they could carry their own shows. They actually did. The quality of the people surrounding Walter White is one of the biggest reasons Breaking Bad works as well as it does. Because a great main character can only shine if the world around them feels real. And every single person in Walt's world, from his family to his enemies to the people caught in between, feels like a complete human being with their own story, their own pain, and their own reasons for doing what they do. Start with Hank Schrader, played by Dean Norris. When Hank first shows up in the pilot, he seems like the most one-dimensional character on the show. He is loud. He is boisterous. He cracks jokes constantly. He is the kind of guy who slaps you on the back too hard and talks over everyone at the dinner table. He is a DEA agent who loves his job and loves talking about it even more. He seems like he exists entirely to be a contrast to Walt, the alpha male brother-in-law who makes the quiet chemistry teacher look even smaller by comparison. If you judged Hank based on the first few episodes alone, you would think he was comic relief and nothing more. But then the show starts peeling back the layers, and you discover that Hank is one of the most complex characters in the entire series. Beneath all the bravado and the tough guy attitude is a man dealing with real fear, real trauma, and real vulnerability. After a violent encounter with Tuco Salamanca early in the series, Hank begins suffering from severe panic attacks. He cannot breathe. His hands shake. He is terrified, and he has no idea how to deal with it. Because his entire identity is built around being the tough guy who is never afraid of anything. Watching Hank struggle with that gap between who he thinks he is supposed to be and who he actually is when the pressure gets real is some of the most quietly powerful storytelling in the show. Later, after being shot and nearly killed by the Salamanca cousins, Hank is left unable to walk. He spends months in a hospital bed, and then more months doing painful physical therapy to learn how to use his legs again. During this period, you see a side of Hank that the early episodes never hinted at. He is angry. He is depressed. He is cruel to his wife Marie, snapping at her and pushing her away because he cannot stand feeling weak. And yet he fights his way back. He refuses to give up. He gets out of that wheelchair through sheer willpower and determination. By the time Hank returns to active duty, you are not just watching the loud, joke-cracking brother-in-law anymore. You are watching a genuinely heroic man who earned every ounce of respect the audience has for him. And then comes the discovery. Hank sitting on that toilet at Walt's house, picking up the copy of Leaves of Grass, reading the inscription from Gale, and realizing in one horrifying instant that the drug lord he has been chasing for years is the man who has been sitting across from him at family barbecues the entire time. The look on Dean Norris's face in that moment is unforgettable. It is shock and rage and disbelief and heartbreak all at once. And from that point forward, Hank's pursuit of Walt becomes the engine that drives the final stretch of the show. His refusal to let Walt get away with it, even when it means risking his career and his life, is what makes Hank one of the true heroes of Breaking Bad. Then there is Skyler White, played by Anna Gunn, and this is where things get complicated. Skyler is one of the most debated characters in television history, and the conversation around her says as much about the audience as it does about the show. For much of the series, a large portion of the audience disliked Skyler, even hated her. She was seen as an obstacle. She was the nagging wife who kept getting in the way of Walt's exciting criminal adventures. Online forums were filled with people complaining about her. And Anna Gunn herself received real-life hatred and threats because of how viewers felt about the character. Gilligan has spoken about this many times, and he has never hidden his frustration with it. He said he always figured Walt would be the one audiences would struggle to sympathize with, not Skyler. He said he was confounded by the anger directed at her. He pointed out that Anna Gunn gave a brilliant performance, and that the writing never asked the audience to dislike Skyler. What happened, Gilligan explained, was that the show was told entirely through Walt's eyes. Even scenes where Walt was not present were framed from his perspective. The audience was so deeply inside Walt's head that they unconsciously adopted his view of the world. And in Walt's world, Skyler was the person standing between him and what he wanted. So the audience saw her as the enemy, even though she was a woman watching her husband destroy their family and trying desperately to protect her children. Gilligan later said something that stuck with a lot of people. He said that even Gus Fring, Walt's actual enemy who literally tried to murder him, did not receive the same level of hatred from fans that Skyler did. He called it a weird thing and said that if he had a magic wand, he would go back and change it. Gunn won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Drama Series twice for her work on the show, which is proof that the industry recognized what she was doing, even if parts of the audience did not. And then there is the character who might be the single best argument for how strong Breaking Bad's supporting cast really is. His name is Saul Goodman, played by Bob Odenkirk, and he is the criminal lawyer, emphasis on the word criminal, who helps Walt navigate the legal and logistical side of the drug business. Saul shows up in the second season, and from the moment he appears on screen, he is impossible to forget. He is sleazy. He is fast-talking. He operates out of a strip mall office decorated to look like the inside of the Constitution. He runs cheesy television commercials promising to fight for your rights. He is, on the surface, a joke, a cartoon, comic relief in a show that desperately needs it. But underneath the flashy suits and the terrible jokes, Saul is sharp. He is resourceful. He knows how to solve problems that Walt and Jesse cannot solve on their own. And he does it with a combination of legal knowledge, criminal connections, and a complete lack of moral boundaries. He is funny, but he is also essential. Without Saul, Walt's operation falls apart within weeks. And Odenkirk plays the character with such depth and charm that you cannot help but love him, even as he helps terrible people do terrible things. Saul Goodman was so popular, so fully realized, and so obviously capable of carrying a larger story that after Breaking Bad ended, he became the lead of his own show. Better Call Saul premiered in 2015 and ran for 6 seasons, ending in 2022. It told the story of how a small-time lawyer named Jimmy McGill transformed into the morally bankrupt Saul Goodman that we meet in Breaking Bad. The show was just as acclaimed as its predecessor, with critics frequently calling it a worthy successor that in some ways even surpassed the original. The fact that a supporting character from Breaking Bad could anchor a 6-season show that earned the same level of praise is something that has almost never happened in television history. It is the ultimate proof of how deeply the Breaking Bad writers developed their characters. Saul was not the only supporting character who made the jump to Better Call Saul. Mike Ehrmantraut, played by Jonathan Banks, also became a central figure in the prequel series. Mike is introduced in Breaking Bad as a no-nonsense fixer and enforcer who works for Gus Fring. He is older, tired, cynical, and has clearly seen too much of the world's ugliness. He does not talk much. He does not waste words. When he does speak, every sentence lands like a hammer, because he only says what needs to be said. Banks plays Mike with a world weariness that makes you feel the weight of every decision the man has ever made. In Better Call Saul, Mike's backstory is fleshed out in detail, revealing a former police officer from Philadelphia whose own moral compromises haunt him just as deeply as Walt's haunt him. Even the smaller, more minor characters in Breaking Bad are written with care that most shows reserve only for their leads. Todd Alquist, played by Jesse Plemons, appears relatively late in the series as a seemingly polite and helpful young man who works for a pest control company that Walt uses as a cover for his operation. Todd is quiet. He is eager to please. He calls Walt Mr. White with genuine respect. He seems like a nice kid. And then, at the end of the train heist episode in Season 5, Todd does something so shocking that it redefines the entire final stretch of the show. After Walt, Jesse and their crew successfully steal a massive amount of a chemical they need for cooking. A young boy on a dirt bike appears in the distance. The boy saw everything, and Todd, without a moment of hesitation, without a flicker of emotion on his face, pulls out a gun and shoots the child dead. That moment is devastating, not because Todd is a screaming, raging villain like Tuco. It is devastating because he is so calm about it. He kills a child with the same casual attitude you would use to swat a fly, and then he looks at Walt and Jesse as if he expects them to thank him for handling the problem. Todd is a different kind of evil. He is polite evil. He is friendly evil. He is evil that smiles at you and holds the door open, and then does something unforgivable without even understanding why it is wrong. And that makes him, in many ways, more unsettling than any other villain on the show. The richness of Breaking Bad's supporting cast is not just impressive on its own. It is the reason the show's world feels alive. When every character, from the main leads down to the people who only appear in a handful of episodes, feels like a real person with real motivations and real stakes, the entire story becomes more believable. You are not watching a show about Walter White. You are watching a show about a world, a web of interconnected lives. And Walter White is the stone thrown into the center that sends ripples in every direction. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But great characters and brilliant writing only matter if the story knows how to hold your attention from one moment to the next, how to build pressure so slowly that you do not even realize how tense you are until the explosion finally comes. And nobody in the history of television has ever understood that rhythm better than Breaking Bad. Section 9. Tension and pacing. The slow burn that explodes. There is a feeling you get while watching Breaking Bad that is hard to describe if you have not experienced it. It is this sense of dread that builds so slowly, so quietly, that you do not even realize it is happening until it is too late. You are sitting on your couch, watching two characters have what seems like a normal conversation, and your heart is pounding. Your hands are gripping the armrest. You are holding your breath without knowing why, and then something happens. Something terrible and sudden and violent, and you realize that the show has been tightening a knot in your stomach for the last 20 minutes without you noticing. That is what Breaking Bad does better than any other show in the history of television. It understands that the anticipation of something horrible is almost always more powerful than the horrible thing itself. Most shows handle tension in a pretty straightforward way. Something dangerous happens, music gets loud, characters start running or fighting, and the audience reacts to what they are seeing. The tension comes from the action, from the noise, from things blowing up or people getting hurt right there in front of you. And that works, to a point. But it wears off quickly. If every episode is loud and fast and explosive, you get used to it. Your brain adjusts. The 10th explosion is not as exciting as the first one, and by the 20th, you are barely paying attention anymore. Breaking Bad understood this, and it solved the problem by doing the opposite of what most shows do. Instead of making things louder and faster, it made things quieter and slower. The show was not afraid to hold a shot for an uncomfortable amount of time. It was not afraid to let silence sit in a room like a weight pressing down on everyone in it. It would give you long stretches of calm, of characters talking, or eating, or driving, or doing absolutely nothing that seemed important. And it would let you marinate in the normalcy of it all. And then, when the violence came, when the explosion finally happened, it hit you 10 times harder because you had been lulled into a false sense of safety. This rhythm, this pattern of slow buildup followed by sudden release, is the heartbeat of the entire show. And the writers and directors mastered it so completely that they could control exactly how the audience felt at any given moment. They could make you anxious during a scene where nothing was happening. They could make you relax right before something terrible occurred. They could drag a moment out for so long that you wanted to scream at the screen, and then pay it off in a way that made all that waiting worth it. One of the best examples of this is a scene in the Season 4 episode called Crawlspace. This is the episode where everything Walt has been building comes crashing down around him. Gus Fring has just told Walt, in the calmest and most terrifying voice imaginable, that he is going to kill Hank. And if Walt tries to interfere, Gus will kill Walt's entire family. Wife, son, infant daughter, all of them. Walt races home, desperate, knowing that the only way to save himself and his family is to disappear. He needs to call the man who creates new identities for people who need to vanish. And he needs money to pay for it. He runs to the crawlspace under his house where he has been hiding his cash. And the money is not there. Most of it is gone. Skyler gave it to Ted Beneke to cover a tax problem that could have exposed their money laundering. Walt needed that money to save his family's lives. And it is gone. He stands there in the crawlspace, staring at the empty spot where his cash used to be. And he starts laughing. Not a happy laugh, not a relieved laugh. A broken, hysterical, terrifying laugh that sounds like a man losing his mind. The camera slowly pulls up and away from him, rising higher and higher, until Walt is lying in the crawlspace looking up, framed by the wooden beams above him like a man lying in his own coffin. Skyler is screaming his name from above. The phone is ringing, and Walt just keeps laughing, staring at the ceiling, completely shattered. That scene is widely considered one of the most disturbing and unsettling moments in the entire series. And the reason it works so well is everything that came before it. The entire season had been building to this point. The tension between Walt and Gus had been growing for episodes and episodes, tightening like a rope being pulled from both ends. Every scene between them was loaded with unspoken threat. Every conversation was a chess move. And when the rope finally snaps, when Walt's world collapses in that crawlspace, the release of all that built-up tension is overwhelming. You feel it physically. Your chest is tight, your breathing is shallow. And the show did that to you without a single gunshot, without a single punch, without any action at all. Just a man lying in a hole under his house, laughing because everything is lost. The show also used this slow burn technique across entire seasons, not just individual episodes. The best example is the build-up to Gus Fring's death at the end of Season 4. From the very first episode of that season, the box cutter episode where Gus kills Victor, the audience knows that the conflict between Walt and Gus can only end one way. One of them is going to kill the other. But the show takes its time getting there. It does not rush toward the confrontation. Instead, it lets the tension build across 13 episodes, each one adding another layer of pressure, another complication, another reason why it seems impossible for Walt to win. Walt tries to poison Gus. It does not work. He tries to get close enough to plant a bomb. He cannot get through Gus's security. Every plan fails. Every attempt is blocked. And with each failure, the situation gets more desperate. The audience watches Walt run out of options one by one, until it seems like there is truly no way out. And then, in the season finale called Face Off, Walt finds the one weakness in Gus's armor: his pride, his hatred of Hector Salamanca. Walt convinces Hector, the old man in the wheelchair who can only communicate by ringing a bell, to be a suicide bomber. Hector goes to the DEA, making Gus believe he is cooperating with law enforcement. Gus, driven by his need to personally deal with the man who killed the person he loved most, goes to Hector's nursing home room to finish him off. Hector looks Gus in the eye, rings his bell one last time, and the bomb strapped to his wheelchair goes off. That payoff works because of the 12 episodes of slow, careful build-up that came before it. If the show had rushed to that moment, if it had gotten there in 3 or 4 episodes instead of 13, it would not have been nearly as satisfying. The long wait is what gives the explosion its power. Every failed plan, every dead end, Every moment where it seemed like Walt was going to lose made the eventual victory feel earned. The audience earned it too. They sat through all that tension, all that anxiety, all those weeks of wondering how it could possibly work out. And the show rewarded them with one of the most memorable scenes in television history. Breaking Bad also used montages in a way that was completely different from how most shows use them. In most shows and movies, a montage is a lazy shortcut. It is a quick series of images set to music that tells you time is passing, or someone is training for a fight, or a business is growing. It saves time. It keeps things moving. But it rarely does anything meaningful. Breaking Bad turned montages into something special. Instead of using them just to skip ahead in time, the show used them to set mood, to shift tone, and to communicate things that dialogue could not. The best example is in the Season 5 episode called Gliding Over All. After Gus is dead and Walt has taken full control of the meth business, the show presents a cooking montage set to the song Crystal Blue Persuasion by Tommy James and the Shondells. You watch Walt and his crew producing meth, distributing it, and collecting money with smooth, almost elegant efficiency. Everything is working. The operation is running like a machine. Money is pouring in faster than they can count it. And the music is upbeat and almost cheerful, which creates this deeply uncomfortable contrast with what you are actually watching. You are watching a man's drug empire running at peak performance, and the show is presenting it like a success story, like a feel-good montage from a movie about someone following their dream. But the discomfort you feel while watching it is the entire point. The montage is not celebrating Walt's success. It is showing you how far he has fallen. He has become so numb to the horror of what he is doing that cooking and distributing methamphetamine has become routine for him. It is boring. It is just another day at the office. And the cheerful music is there to make you feel how wrong that is. If the scene had been set to dark, ominous music, you would have expected to feel uneasy. By making it sound pleasant, the show forces you to create the unease yourself, and that makes it hit so much harder. The train heist in the Season 5 episode Dead Freight is another masterclass in tension. Walt, Jesse, and Mike come up with a plan to steal a massive amount of a chemical called methylamine from a freight train as it passes through a remote area. The plan is complicated and requires precise timing. If anything goes wrong, if the train starts moving before they finish, if someone shows up unexpectedly, the whole thing falls apart and they all go to prison, or worse. The show dedicates almost the entire episode to this heist, and it builds the tension with surgical precision. You watch each step of the plan unfold in real time. The train arrives. The clock starts. Things go smoothly at first, and then they do not. A good Samaritan shows up to help what he thinks is a stranded truck driver, not knowing that the truck is part of the heist. Time runs out. Jesse is still under the train. The engine starts to pull forward. He barely makes it out alive. And for one brief, beautiful moment, everyone is celebrating. They did it. They pulled it off. Walt, Jesse, and Todd are standing there, laughing and cheering, and then a boy on a dirt bike appears on a nearby hill. A child who saw everything. Todd waves at the boy. The boy waves back. And then, Todd pulls out his gun and shoots the child dead. That moment is devastating, precisely because of the relief that came right before it. The show let you feel happy. It let you celebrate with the characters. It gave you 10 seconds of joy. And then it ripped it away in the most horrifying way possible. That is Breaking Bad's pacing at its absolute cruelest and most effective. It knows exactly when to let you breathe, and it knows exactly when to take that breath away. This rhythm, this constant push and pull between calm and chaos, between waiting and payoff, is what makes Breaking Bad almost physically exhausting to watch, in the best possible way. You finish an episode, and you feel like you have been through something real. Your body is tense, your mind is racing, and you immediately need to watch the next one. because the show has trained you to expect that every quiet moment is just the setup for the next earthquake. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And all of this tension, all of this careful build-up across 5 seasons, leads to one single episode where everything the show has ever promised comes due. 1 hour of television where every thread is pulled tight and then snapped, where every choice catches up to every character, where the greatest show ever made delivers its single greatest achievement. An episode called Ozymandias. Section 10. Ozymandias, the greatest episode of television ever made. There is an episode of Breaking Bad that holds a record no other episode of any television show has ever matched. It has a perfect 10 out of 10 rating on IMDb, with over 200,000 people voting, and not a single other episode in the history of the website has held that score for as long. TV Guide named it the best television episode of the 21st century. Rolling Stone called it the best television episode of all time. And Vince Gilligan himself, the man who created the show and oversaw every single episode from start to finish, called it the best episode they ever had or ever will have. The episode is called Ozymandias. It is the 14th episode of the 5th and final season, and it is the hour of television where everything Breaking Bad spent 5 years building comes crashing down in the most devastating, most beautiful, and most perfectly executed way imaginable. The title comes from a poem written in 1818 by a poet named Percy Bysshe Shelley. The poem is about a traveler who comes across the ruins of a massive statue in the desert. The statue is of an ancient king, a pharaoh, and on the base are carved the words, "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." But there are no works left to look at. The empire is gone. The cities are gone. Everything the king built has turned to dust. All that remains is the broken statue, half buried in sand, surrounded by nothing but empty desert stretching out in every direction. The poem is about pride and the fact that no matter how powerful you become, no matter how large your empire grows, time will destroy everything you build. And that is exactly what happens to Walter White in this episode. The episode was written by Moira Wally Beckett and directed by Rian Johnson, who would later go on to direct Star Wars: The Last Jedi and the Knives Out movies. Wally Beckett had wanted to use the Ozymandias poem for a long time and brought the idea to Gilligan, who loved it. Bryan Cranston actually recorded himself reading the entire poem aloud, and it was used in a promotional trailer for the final season. Johnson and Wally Beckett had worked together before on the show, having previously collaborated on the bottle episode Fly back in season 3. And they had a strong creative relationship that served this episode well. Wally Beckett was given more creative freedom on this script than she had experienced on any previous episode, and she used every bit of it. The episode opens with a flashback to the very beginning. Walt and Jesse are in the desert, at the exact same location where the show's first meth cook took place, and they are making their very first batch together. Walt is still in his early days. He still has his hair. Jesse is young and carefree. They are just getting started, and neither of them has any idea what is coming. Walt steps away from the RV to call Skyler, who is still pregnant with Holly, and he lies to her about working late at the car wash. It is a small, harmless lie, the kind of lie that a normal person might tell their wife on a normal day. But in the context of everything the audience knows is about to happen, that small lie carries the weight of the entire series. This is where it all started. A man standing in the desert, lying to his wife, with no idea how far that first lie would take him. This flashback scene was the very last thing filmed for the entire series. The crew deliberately waited to shoot it so that Bryan Cranston's and Aaron Paul's hair could grow back to match how they looked in the early seasons. That level of attention to detail, saving the very first scene of the episode to be the very last scene they ever filmed, tells you everything about how much care went into this hour of television. And then the flashback fades, and we are back in the present, and the nightmare begins. The previous episode ended with a cliffhanger. Hank and his partner Steve Gomez had finally cornered Walt in the desert, right at the spot where Walt buried his money. But Jack Welker and his gang of white supremacists, who Walt had called for help before trying to call them off, arrived with guns. The episode ended with bullets flying, and the audience had to wait a week to find out what happened. Azymandas answers that question in the worst possible way. When the shooting stops, Gomez is dead. Hank has been shot in the leg and is hiding behind a vehicle, unable to move. Jack's men have won, and Walt, who moments ago was handcuffed in the back of a car, is now free and desperate to save the one person he never wanted to get hurt. He begs, he pleads. He offers Jack his entire fortune, $80 million buried right there in the ground, if Jack will just let Hank go. He is frantic, bargaining with everything he has, offering up the money he spent years building and killing to protect. And Hank, lying on the ground with a bullet in his leg, knowing exactly what is about to happen, looks at Walt and says something that cuts through everything. He says, "You are the smartest guy I ever met, and you are too stupid to see. He made up his mind 10 minutes ago." Hank knows. He knows Jack is going to kill him, regardless of what Walt offers. He knows there is no deal to be made, no amount of money that will change the outcome. And he faces his death with more dignity and courage than any other character in the entire series. Jack pulls the trigger. Hank dies, and Walt collapses onto the ground, falling in stages, his body crumpling in a way that mirrors the fallen statue from the Shelley poem that gives the episode its name. From that point forward, the episode moves like dominoes falling, one devastating moment after another, each one worse than the last, each one a direct consequence of choices that were made seasons ago. Jack's men take most of Walt's money, leaving him with only one barrel. Walt, consumed by rage and grief and a need to hurt someone as badly as he has been hurt, turns to Jesse, who has been pulled from his hiding spot under a car. Walt looks at Jesse, the young man who has been his partner from the very beginning, and tells him something that he has been holding on to for 3 seasons. He tells Jesse that he watched Jane die. He stood there and watched her choke in her sleep, and he did nothing to save her. He says it not to confess, he says it to wound. He says it because he wants Jesse to feel even a fraction of the pain he is feeling in that moment. And the look on Aaron Paul's face when those words land is one of the most heartbreaking moments of acting you will ever see. Then the episode follows Walt as his entire world falls apart in real time. He rolls his single barrel of money through the desert, passing the same pair of tan pants that flew off the RV way back in the very first episode of the series. That detail, those pants lying in the sand, is something the writers planted 59 episodes earlier. They have been waiting in the desert this whole time, and now Walt walks right past them. It is a tiny detail that most viewers might not even catch, but for those who do, it is a gut punch. This is where it started. This is where it ends. Walt makes it home. He tries to get Skyler and the kids to pack and run with him, but Skyler already knows about Hank. Marie called her. Marie told her everything. And for the first time in the series, Skyler does not argue with Walt. She does not try to reason with him. She grabs a knife from the kitchen and tells him to get out. Walt Jr., who has just found out the truth about his father for the first time, calls the police. Walt and Skyler struggle over the knife. Walt Jr. throws himself between his parents to protect his mother. And suddenly, the man who told himself every single day that he was doing this for his family is standing in his own kitchen, bleeding, with his wife and son looking at him like he is a stranger, like he is a monster. Walt grabs baby Holly and runs. He drives away with his infant daughter, while Skyler chases the car down the street, screaming. It is the most chaotic, most painful, most human scene in the entire series. And then Walt does something that reveals, even in this darkest moment, that there is still a tiny piece of the old Walter White left inside. He calls Skyler from a payphone. He knows the police are listening. He knows the call is being recorded, and he puts on a performance. He yells at Skyler. He calls her terrible things. He says cruel, vicious words that make him sound like a controlling, abusive monster. But he is doing it on purpose. He is saying those things so the police will hear them. He is making himself sound like the villain so that Skyler will look like the victim. He is clearing her name. He is protecting her the only way he has left. The episode's writer, Moira Walley-Beckett, later confirmed that this scene was not meant to be open to interpretation. Walt was deliberately putting on an act to protect Skyler. But even knowing that, the scene is almost impossible to watch without being shaken, because the words he says are so harsh, and because you can hear him fighting back tears while he says them. Bryan Cranston's performance in that phone call is some of the finest acting ever captured on film or television. The episode ends with Walt leaving Holly at a fire station, turning on the lights to make sure the firefighters inside will find her, and then waiting on the side of a road for the man who will give him a new identity and send him far away from Albuquerque. A minivan pulls up. Walt loads his barrel of money inside. And as the van drives away, the camera shows us Albuquerque spread out in the distance behind him, flat and quiet in the early morning light. Everything Walt built is gone. His family is gone. His money is mostly gone. His brother-in-law is dead. His empire is dust. And all that remains is a man alone in a van, driving away from the ruins of his own life, surrounded by nothing but the lone and level desert stretching far away. Azymandas earned Moira Walley-Beckett the Emmy Award for Outstanding Writing for a Drama Series. Bryan Cranston and Anna Gunn both won acting Emmys that year as well, with much of the credit going to their performances in this episode. It was watched by 6.4 million viewers when it first aired, the highest number the show had reached at that point. And more than a decade later, it still sits at the very top of IMDb's list of the greatest television episodes ever made, unmatched and untouched by anything that has come after it. Ozymandias is the proof. It is the evidence that every claim anyone has ever made about Breaking Bad being the greatest show of all time is not exaggeration. It is the episode that justifies every hour you spent watching, every moment of tension you endured, every character you invested in. It is the payoff for 60 episodes of the greatest storytelling ever put on screen. And it could only exist because the show had the courage to build slowly, patiently, and carefully toward a single devastating hour where everything fell apart. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But even after Ozymandias, the show was not finished. It still had 2 episodes left, including a finale that had to somehow follow the greatest episode of television ever made and stick the landing. And in a television landscape littered with shows that fumbled their endings, Breaking Bad did something almost nobody thought was possible. Section 11. The perfect ending. How Felina stuck the landing. There is a curse in television. It does not have an official name, but every serious viewer knows exactly what it is. It is the curse of the bad ending. A show can spend years building characters you love, telling stories that keep you up at night, creating moments that become part of your daily conversations. And then it can throw all of that away in a single final episode. One bad ending can undo years of brilliant work. It can turn a beloved show into something people are embarrassed to recommend. It can take a cultural event and turn it into a cautionary tale. And it happens far more often than it should. Game of Thrones is probably the most famous example. For years, it was one of the biggest shows on the planet. People threw watch parties for new episodes. They named their children after characters. It was a genuine cultural phenomenon. And then the final season arrived. And the ending was so rushed, so unsatisfying, and so disconnected from everything the show had built that it essentially disappeared from the conversation overnight. People stopped talking about it. People stopped recommending it. The ending did not just disappoint fans. It damaged the entire show's legacy in a way that has never fully recovered. How I Met Your Mother did the same thing. 9 seasons of build-up, leading to a finale that ignored what the audience had invested in, and made choices that felt like a betrayal of the characters. Fans were furious. The goodwill that the show had built up over nearly a decade evaporated in a single hour. This is the landscape that Breaking Bad's finale walked into. The show had just delivered Ozymandias, widely considered the greatest episode of television ever made. It had 2 episodes left. The expectations were impossibly high. The pressure was enormous, and the history of television said that sticking the landing was the one thing that almost nobody could do. The odds were against them. And then Felina aired. And Breaking Bad did what almost no other show has ever managed to do. It ended perfectly. Felina is the 62nd and final episode of Breaking Bad, and it carries more weight in its title alone than most shows carry in their entire run. The word Felina works on multiple levels, and the writers clearly intended all of them. Most obviously, it is an anagram of the word finale. Rearrange the letters and they spell out exactly what the episode is. But it goes deeper than that. There is an old country song by Marty Robbins called El Paso, about a cowboy who falls in love with a woman and ends up dying for her in the desert town where their story began. The woman in that song is named Felina. Walt listens to that song during the episode, and the parallels are impossible to miss. A man returns to the place where everything started, knowing he is going to die, because there is one last thing he needs to do. And then there is a third layer. The letters Fe, Li, and Na are the chemical symbols for iron, lithium, and sodium. Iron is in blood. Lithium is used in the production of methamphetamine, and sodium is in tears. Blood, meth, and tears. The 3 things that define Walter White's entire journey, hidden right there in the title of his final episode. The episode picks up with Walt in hiding. He has been living alone in a cabin in New Hampshire for months, growing a beard, wasting away, cut off from everyone and everything he ever knew. His money is almost gone. His family wants nothing to do with him. He is a ghost, just waiting to die. And then he sees something on television that changes everything. His former business partners, Gretchen and Elliot Schwartz, the people he blames for cheating him out of the success he deserved decades ago, appear on a talk show. They downplay Walt's contribution to their company, Gray Matter Technologies, and distance themselves from him publicly. They essentially erase him from the story of his own creation. And that is the thing that pulls Walt out of hiding. Not love for his family, not a desire for redemption. Pride. The same pride that drove every major decision he made throughout the entire series. The same pride that turned a chemistry teacher into a drug lord. The same pride that got Hank killed and destroyed his marriage and ruined Jesse's life. Even now, even at the very end, Walt cannot stand the idea of being forgotten. He cannot stand someone else taking credit for what he built. So he goes back to Albuquerque. And what follows is an episode that ties up every single loose thread the show has been weaving for 5 seasons. And it does so in a way that feels both surprising and completely inevitable. Walt visits Gretchen and Elliot at their home. He does not hurt them. Instead, he gives them the remainder of his money, just under $10 million, and tells them to set up a trust fund for his children. They do not want to do it. They are terrified of him. So Walt tells them that he has hired 2 hitmen who will be watching them, and if the money does not reach his children, those hitmen will find them. Gretchen and Elliot agree. Walt leaves, and then the camera reveals the truth. The two red laser dots that Gretchen and Elliot saw on their chests were not from hitmen. They were from laser pointers held by Badger and Skinny Pete, Jesse's two harmless stoner friends, who have no idea what is actually going on. It is the kind of clever, dark solution that only Walter White could come up with. And it is also the show's way of telling you that even at the end, Walt's greatest weapon was never violence. It was his brain. Then Walt goes to see Skyler one last time. This is the scene that the entire series has been building toward, and it is handled with such quiet power that it might be the most important 2 minutes in the whole show. Walt stands in Skyler's kitchen. She looks at him with exhaustion and pain, and something that might be the last traces of love buried under years of damage. And Walt starts to speak. He starts to say the words he has said 100 times before, the lie that justified everything. He starts to say he did it for the family, and Skyler stops him. She says she does not want to hear it. Not again. Not one more time. And something shifts in Walt's face. Something breaks open. And for the first time in 5 seasons, Walter White tells the truth. He says he did it for himself. He liked it. He was good at it. And he was really alive. That is the confession. That is the moment. After years of lying to everyone around him, after years of lying to himself most of all, Walt finally admits what the audience has known for a long time. The meth, the empire, the power, the danger. None of it was ever about providing for his family. It was about filling the hole inside himself. It was about feeling like he mattered. That confession is the emotional climax of the entire series. It is the line that everything has been pointing toward since the pilot. And it works because it is honest. There is no drama in it, no shouting, no tears. Just a tired, dying man standing in a kitchen, telling the truth for what might be the first and last time in his life. It is the most human Walt has been since the first episode. And it is heartbreaking, because you realize that if he had been this honest from the beginning, none of this had to happen. After saying goodbye to Skyler and looking through a window at his son one final time from a distance, Walt goes to Jack Welker's compound. Jack and his gang are holding Jesse prisoner, forcing him to cook meth. Walt has built a remote-controlled machine gun in the trunk of his car, rigged to a mechanism that activates when he presses a button on his car keys. He goes inside. He gets close to Jack and his men, and when the moment is right, he tackles Jesse to the ground and hits the button. The machine gun tears through the walls and kills every single one of Jack's men. Jack is wounded, but alive. He tries to bargain with Walt, telling him he will never find his money if Jack dies. Walt does not care about the money anymore. He shoots Jack mid-sentence, the same way Jack shot Hank. Then he slides the gun across the floor to Jesse. This is the final moment between the two of them. Walt and Jesse, teacher and student. The partnership that started in a beat-up RV in the desert and ended in a blood-soaked compound surrounded by dead bodies. Walt gives Jesse the gun and waits. He is giving Jesse the choice. After everything Walt has done to him, after every manipulation, every lie, every betrayal, Jesse has the right to pull the trigger. But Jesse looks at Walt and sees something he was not expecting. He sees that Walt has been hit. A stray bullet from the machine gun caught him in the side. Walt is already dying. Jesse drops the gun. He says one word: "Do it yourself." And then he walks away. He gets in a car, crashes through the compound gate, and drives off into the night, screaming and crying and laughing, finally free after years of captivity and abuse. Walt wanders into the meth lab inside the compound. He walks through it slowly, touching the equipment, looking at the instruments that represent the one thing he was truly great at. He has a small, peaceful smile on his face. The police sirens are getting closer. And then Walter White, formerly a high school chemistry teacher in Albuquerque, New Mexico, lies down on the floor of the lab and dies. The final shot is from above, looking down on his body, surrounded by the equipment that defined his life and caused his death. The police arrive and find him there, and the show ends. Felina earned a 9.9 rating on IMDb, making it one of the highest-rated finales in television history. It did exactly what a great ending is supposed to do. It gave every character a conclusion that felt earned. Skyler got the truth she deserved. Jesse got his freedom. Walt got to use his brain one last time, protect his family's financial future, and die on his own terms in the place where he felt most alive. Nothing felt rushed. Nothing felt cheap. Nothing felt like a betrayal of who these characters had been for 5 seasons. Gilligan had always planned for Walt to die. He said the show made an explicit promise to the audience in the very first episode. Walt was diagnosed with cancer and given roughly 2 years to live. He dies almost exactly 2 years later. The show kept its promise. It did not cheat. It did not look for a trick ending or a surprise twist. It simply followed its story to its natural, inevitable conclusion. And that is why Breaking Bad remains one of the most recommended shows of all time, more than a decade after it ended. Because the ending holds. It does not let you down. It does not make you regret the hours you invested. It sends you off with the rare and precious feeling that you just watched something complete, something whole, something that knew exactly what it was from the very first frame to the very last. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But the story of Breaking Bad does not end with Felina. The impact of this show stretched far beyond its final episode, changing the rules of what television could be, inspiring an entire generation of shows that followed in its footsteps, and building a legacy that grows stronger with every passing year. Section 12. The Legacy. How Breaking Bad Changed Television Forever. When Breaking Bad aired its final episode on September 29, 2013, the show did not just end. It graduated. It moved from being a television series that people argued about and debated into something larger, something permanent. It became the standard. It became the thing that every drama that came after it would be measured against, whether those shows wanted that comparison or not. And more than a decade later, nothing has knocked it off that pedestal. Nothing has even come close. The numbers alone tell a story that is hard to argue with. Over the course of its run, Breaking Bad won 16 Primetime Emmy Awards. Bryan Cranston won the award for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series 4 times, a record for the same role that stood unmatched for years. Aaron Paul won Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Drama Series 3 times. Anna Gunn won Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Drama Series twice. The show itself won Outstanding Drama Series twice. Those are not just impressive numbers. Those are the kind of numbers that define an era. When you look at the Emmy Awards from 2008 to 2014, Breaking Bad did not just compete, it dominated. But the awards are only a small part of the picture. In 2013, the same year the show ended, Breaking Bad entered the Guinness World Records as the most critically acclaimed television show of all time. That is not a fan poll or an internet ranking. That is the Guinness World Records, the same organization that tracks the tallest buildings and the fastest runners, officially declaring that no show in the history of the medium had ever received this level of universal praise. A 2015 survey by The Hollywood Reporter asked 2,800 actors, producers, directors, and other industry professionals to name their favorite shows of all time. Breaking Bad came in at number 2. These are not casual viewers. These are the people who make television for a living. And they ranked Breaking Bad above almost everything ever created. Rolling Stone, one of the most respected entertainment publications in the world, ranked Breaking Bad third on its list of the 100 greatest TV shows of all time in both 2016 and 2022. The fact that it held the same position across 6 years, with hundreds of new shows premiering in between, tells you that the show's reputation is not fading. It is locked in. And in 2023, Rotten Tomatoes conducted a poll of critics and ranked Breaking Bad as the best television series of the last 25 years. Not top 5, not top 3. The best. 25 years of television, thousands of shows, and the critics said Breaking Bad was the one that stood above them all. One of the most important parts of Breaking Bad's legacy is something that happened almost by accident, and it changed the way people watch television forever. When the show was heading into its 4th season, Netflix made the earlier seasons available for streaming. At the time, this was still a relatively new concept. Most people watched shows when they aired on television, 1 episode per week. And if you missed the first few seasons, you were out of luck. Netflix changed that equation completely. Suddenly, anyone could go back and watch Breaking Bad from the very beginning. They could catch up at their own pace, watching multiple episodes in a row if they wanted to. And millions of people did exactly that. The result was extraordinary. The audience for Breaking Bad essentially doubled between the 4th and 5th seasons. People who had never heard of the show were suddenly obsessed with it. They were binge-watching entire seasons in a weekend, and then showing up for the new episodes alongside viewers who had been watching from the start. Breaking Bad became one of the first shows to prove that streaming could save a television series. It proved that a show did not need massive ratings from day one to become a hit. It just needed to be good enough that when people found it, they could not stop watching. Netflix did not create Breaking Bad's quality, but it gave the show a second life and turned a cult favorite into a mainstream sensation. The streaming model that we all take for granted today, where a show can build its audience over time through on-demand viewing, owes a significant debt to what happened with Breaking Bad. The show's influence on other television dramas is impossible to overstate. Before Breaking Bad, most network and cable dramas followed a familiar pattern. The main character was generally likable. The status quo was generally maintained from episode to episode. Bad things happened, but they were usually resolved within an episode or two, and the show reset to something comfortable. Breaking Bad proved that audiences were not just willing to follow a protagonist who becomes genuinely evil. They were hungry for it. They wanted complexity. They wanted moral ambiguity. They wanted characters who changed in permanent, irreversible ways. After Breaking Bad ended, a wave of shows emerged that clearly carried its DNA. Shows like Ozark, which follows a financial advisor who gets pulled into a money laundering operation for a drug cartel. Shows like True Detective, which brought cinematic visual storytelling to a crime drama in a way that Breaking Bad pioneered. Shows like Fargo, which used dark humor and morally complex characters in a crime setting. Shows like Mr. Robot, which featured a deeply flawed protagonist whose grip on reality becomes increasingly unreliable. None of these shows are copies of Breaking Bad. They are all doing their own thing. But they exist in a landscape that Breaking Bad helped create. The door that Gilligan kicked open. The one that said, television can be this ambitious, this dark, this visually stunning, and this uncompromising, is the door that all of these shows walked through. Breaking Bad also proved that television could be cinematic in a way that had never been done before on a consistent basis. Shows like The Sopranos and The Wire had elevated the medium with their writing and performances. But Breaking Bad took the visual side of television to a completely new level. The camera work, the color theory, the use of the New Mexico landscape, the montages, the object point of view shots. All of it showed that a television show did not have to look like television. It could look like a movie. It could look like art. And that raised the bar for every show that came after it. Today, audiences expect their dramas to look beautiful. They expect cinematic framing and meaningful visual choices. Breaking Bad is a major reason why those expectations exist. The show's legacy also extends into something that almost never happens in entertainment. It spawned an entire expanded universe that matched the quality of the original. Better Call Saul. The prequel series focused on the origin of Saul Goodman and the rise of Gus Fring's drug empire, premiered in 2015 and ran for 6 seasons until 2022. It was created by Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould, and from its very first season, it was met with the same level of critical praise that Breaking Bad received. Critics regularly called it a worthy successor, and many argued that in some ways, it even surpassed the original. It featured the same attention to visual detail, the same patient storytelling, the same deeply human character work. And it enriched the original series by filling in backstories and adding context that made rewatching Breaking Bad an even richer experience. And then there was El Camino, a feature film released on Netflix in 2019 that followed Jesse Pinkman immediately after the events of the Breaking Bad finale. It picked up right where Felina left off, with Jesse driving away from the compound, and it told the story of how he managed to escape Albuquerque and start a new life. The film brought back Aaron Paul and featured appearances from Bryan Cranston and Jonathan Banks, along with other familiar faces from the series. It was not just a cash grab or a nostalgia play. It was a genuine continuation of the story, made with the same level of care and quality that defined the original show. The fact that Breaking Bad could produce a prequel series and a sequel film, both of which were critically acclaimed, is something that has almost no comparison in television history. Perhaps the most telling sign of Breaking Bad's lasting power is what happened to other shows that failed where it succeeded. Game of Thrones was arguably the only show that rivaled Breaking Bad in terms of cultural impact during the 2000s. But after its widely criticized final season, the show essentially vanished from the conversation. People stopped recommending it. People stopped rewatching it. The bad ending poisoned everything that came before it. Breaking Bad had the opposite experience. Because its ending was so satisfying, so earned, so true to the characters and the story, people never stopped talking about it. They never stopped recommending it. They never stopped rewatching it. New viewers discover the show every year, and they come away with the same reaction that people had in 2013. This is the greatest show ever made. And the rewatchability is a huge part of the legacy. Breaking Bad is a show that rewards second and third viewings in a way that very few shows can match. When you watch it again, knowing how the story ends, you catch things you missed the first time. You see the foreshadowing planted in early episodes. You notice the color choices. You pick up on the way characters' wardrobes change over time. You understand lines of dialogue that seemed throwaway the first time around, but now carry enormous weight. Every rewatch reveals new layers, new details, new reasons to be amazed at the level of craft that went into every single episode. That is not the mark of a show that was popular. That is the mark of a show that was built to last. Breaking Bad changed what we expect from television. It changed how shows look, how they sound, how they handle characters, how they build tension, and how they end. It proved that a strange idea about a chemistry teacher cooking meth could become the most acclaimed piece of storytelling in the history of the medium. It proved that television could stand shoulder to shoulder with film and literature as a legitimate art form. And it set a standard that, more than a decade later, no other show has been able to reach. So is Breaking Bad the greatest show ever made? After everything we have talked about today, after the writing and the acting and the cinematography and the color theory and the villains and the pacing and the ending and the legacy, I think the answer is clear. It is not just the greatest show ever made. It is the show that proved how great this medium can be. And nothing that has come before it or after it has ever managed to do what Breaking Bad did. Turn on the first episode. Watch Walter White step out of that RV in his underwear. And let the greatest story ever told on a screen take you from the very first lie to the very last truth. If you enjoyed this deep dive, Make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.